Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the Richmond Selectboard, March 20th, 2023. Before we begin our tonight's agenda, does anybody have any public comment on anything that is not currently an agenda item? Okay, seeing none, is there any item that needs to be added to tonight's agenda?
I do have one.
Okay, could you come up?
Direct me where to stand.
Right there.
Right here's good.
State your name, please.
My name is Nicholas Ponzio, Richmond resident. I'd like the select board to consider a motion to adopt a non-binding resolution regarding safe sharing of.
Okay.
Regarding what?
Safe sharing of the roadways. Okay, I think we can probably fit that in. There's a logical place for it to go. Thank you. Okay. Our first item on the agenda tonight is consideration of approval of the Chittenden Solid Waste District fiscal year 24 budget. And do we have Sarah Reeves from CSWD here with us?
Yeah, I see that.
Oh, she's already got a camera on.
Yeah.
Okay, so run up to her. Or... Okay, so Sarah, there you go. So Sarah, the floor is yours. Let us know what you need us to do about the budget.
Thank you very much. I do have a PowerPoint that if I could share my screen, that would be.
Solid waste budget.
If not, I can also walk through. Give me 1 second. So just while we're seeing if
We need to mute a few people.
sharing of the screen going, I can just talk a little bit about who we are. So I am Sarah Reeves. I'm the executive director for the Chittenden Solid.
Sarah, just 1 sec.
We have a few.
You know where.
I think that was.
It's quiet now. Okay, we are just trying to find the mystery person who needed to be muted. Sarah, you are now not going to be interrupted. Go ahead.
Thanks very much. And thank you. I will share my screen. Appreciate that. Thank you again. Appreciate the opportunity to present our fiscal 24 budget. So I always like to start off with a little bit of who we are so that I'm not presupposing that people know who Chittenden Solid Waste District is. We are a municipality who was formed for the purpose of managing the waste that is generated in Chittenden County by residents and businesses and institutions. And because this is our budget, I always also like to highlight where our revenue comes from. And in particular, to point out that we receive no direct payments from any of our member towns. So we don't receive any revenue from income tax, sales tax, or property taxes. You'll see that the bulk of our revenue does come from our user fees or tip fees, and then the remaining come from material sales or product sales and a solid waste management. Also, folks tend to ask us, well, how are we doing as a district? And the answer is really quite well. So what I like to focus on this slide on is the amount of material that is still being sent to the landfill in Coventry that could have been recovered or diverted into a different stream. And you can see there's about half of that 120,000 tons that could either have gone into Reuben recycling, recycled as compost or compost, or brought in for special materials such as scrap metal or batteries, or as construction and demolition debris. So while we're doing quite well as a county, as district, there's always more that we could be doing, and that's what we point out. And I tend to start with our bottom line. So we're looking at revenue of just over $15 million, $15,400,000. Our expenses are looking to come in at about $14,400,000, and the remaining income from operations, nearly $900,000, then gets flowed into our various reserves. So we have a priority list of our reserve accounts, and as each one is filled, then it flows into the next and into the next. The bulk does tend to go into our capital reserve fund, but we have an operating reserve, we have biosolids reserve, So we have that as our priority, and then we get down to zero, just like every other municipality needs. Compared to the current budget, we're looking at a just under 10% increase in our revenue and a just under 9% increase in our expenses. And when we're looking at what is coming up high on our expense sheet this year, it is the administrative costs, which are increasing, and that is a fairly large increase due to moving into a new administrative office building. We are leasing space in South Burlington, starting in, actually, we've already started leasing, we're moving in about 3 weeks. And the property that we have on Redmond Road has outlived its usefulness, and we will be looking at closing that property, most likely handing it over to the town of Wilton. So we'll be moving out and in a couple of weeks and have a new residence for ourselves. Also, materials management increases, so costs to physically haul our materials from our drop-off centers and to manage materials through our facilities has gone up pretty significantly this year as well. So the sources of funding, the user fees, tip fees, solid waste management fees, our product sales. This is really where our fees go to and what they pay for. So our operations programs, which are the drop-off centers, the recycling facility, the environmental depot and rover, and the compost facility, they need to essentially be as self-sufficient as possible. And they do that through their product sales and their user fees. And that is laid out in our charter. So our charter does say that once we have solid waste facilities, that they need to be generating revenue other than through a town assessment. And we will not be assessing our member towns any fees this year. As I don't think the last time we did that was in the 1990s. So we are looking to be as self-sufficient as we can. And again, just to further illuminate what that solid waste management fee is, it's $27 per ton that is charged to haulers when they deliver tons of trash generated in Coventry to be disposed in the Coventry landfill. We are not increasing that fee this year, excuse me, but I have let my board know that I would like us to have a discussion this year about that fee. And you know, it's not many things have not increased in the past 10 years. This is one of them, and we need to take a hard look at what that fee is designed to do, how it, what it pays for, and is there a mechanism for a series of slow, steady increases to cover certain things. And that's going to be a topic of major conversation over next year. Our materials recycling facility, we are looking to increase the tip fee from $80 per ton to $85 per ton. And that is in direct relation to a significant increase in the cost of the contract that we have with Casella to operate that facility on our behalf. So currently we are paying them $45 a ton to process every ton that comes into the MRF. And that fee is going up, actually it already has gone up to $70 per ton. So to recover some of the expenses associated with that contract, we are raising our tip fee modestly by $dollars. We are budgeting the revenue from the sale of recycling at just about the same as we had for this current fiscal year. It is, the markets are stable to stagnant, so we don't want to overestimate the revenue there. It was the revenue was very high about a year ago, and that was a surprise to everyone, as quite an anomaly. So we've gone back to very conservative estimations on revenue for the sale of recycling. Our compost facility is also increasing their tip fee from $65 a ton to $70 a ton. And this chart does highlight the issue, and it's a similar issue that we'll see at the drop-off centers as well. In fiscal 22, we were just about break even at the organic diversion facility. And that was when we saw a loss of a significant amount of our tons coming into the facility, inbound tons processing, when Casella opened their operation in Williston. They have it's called a depackaging facility. It basically takes unsaleable, undonatable material that is still in containers and packaging and cans, breaks open the food scraps from that those containers, and then physically pulps that material So they were diverting a significant amount of tons away from composting into that facility. So we lost a lot of inbound material and lost a lot of revenue. So we're starting to recover that, but not quite to the point where we were before. So again, a modest increase in that tip fee is. In our drop-off centers, similarly, they've been experiencing for the past 5 or so years, heavy subsidies. So basically, a subsidy is considered a loss. It has to be subsidized by mainly the solid waste management fee. The fiscal 22 subsidy was just shy of $400,000. This year, we're budgeting $422,000 as a subsidy, and without a fee increase at our drop-off centers, we would have the similar $421,000 subsidy or loss. So we are raising bag fees effective July 1 to $3 for a small bag, $8 for a medium bag, and $11 for a large bag. And like I said, without those increases, we would be experiencing yet another loss in the drop-off centers. Our staffing changes, we're also experiencing some difficulty in hiring some folks. We've been trying to hire a mechanic, for example, for about a year and a half. And with that also we have some pressures on us with the COLA, with the cost of living adjustment and consumer price index. We are proposing this budget as 7% COLA, and what we are doing to try to offset the impacts of the COLA, which I do think is very, very necessary and deserved for our employees. We also had an increase in healthcare benefits. Benefits to the tune of about 10 or 12%. So to offset those costs, we moved to a lower cost healthcare plan as of January, and as of July, we will be requiring employees who do opt into that healthcare plan to contribute 3.5% of their salary towards the premiums, up from 3.25%. So these two combined cost savings measures helped to offset and ended up only increasing the total compensation per employee by just under 2%. We are still in the midst of a very robust capital plan. So we are looking to make some significant investments at our Milton Drop-Off Center and our Burlington Drop-Off Center. At the end of this fiscal year of the capital plan, fiscal 24, we will have a balance of about $3.35 million. That capital reserve was the beneficiary of some significant excess revenue from the MERC from last year. So that's why we're able to continue to have a solid capital improvement plan going forward and not drain down the reserves. The one reserve that is struggling is the post-closure reserve on the landfills in Williston. So that we're nearing the end of our 30-year commitment. And when you close a landfill, a lined landfill, you have 30 years of care. And then you can apply to the state for custodial care, which is a lower level of ongoing management of the landfill. And we are not there yet. We're in about year 28 of that closure plan, and there needs to be some more. And we right now are going to be running short. So that's also one of the conversations we need to have with our board this year to determine how we're going to adequately fund that post-closure reserve so that we can continue to do some of the work that we need to do to make sure that we can enter into custodial care within about the next 5 or 7 years. And per our charter, we are required to go to our member towns, to our select boards and city councils, and ask for your vote of our budget. And so with that, I will start my share and answer questions.
Okay, so Sarah, thank you very much for your presentation. Before we open this up to the public, I'd like to see if any members of the select board have any questions or comments.
Wow, yours way taller than mine.
I'm sorry, could we hold off until the select board has had a chance to ask questions? Everybody who's on the call, please just hold on for a little bit. Select board. Lisa.
Thanks.
Sarah's up there.
I'd like to know what's your percentage increase for the drop-off center fees for individuals?
We have no way to know how much individuals will have their fees raised per household. It all depends on generation. But for example, the current small bag price is $2. So we're bumping that up to $3 pre-COVID, the small bag price was $2.75. So within the past 3 years, the real increase is about 25 cents on that small bag. But, you know, again, it really depends on how each household wants to manage their generation and how many trips they want to make. They, for example, in the wintertime, might say, I'm going to go once a month, and I'm going to put all my kitchen bags into a very large 45-gallon bag. And instead of paying $3 each time I go every month, every week, I might put into one 45-gallon bag and just pay the one fee once a month. It's so individualized that it's hard to say how much it might impact an individual also.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any other questions from any of the select board members? Okay, seeing none. Is there anybody present here in the room who would like to ask any questions? Seeing none, are there anybody coming in via Zoom who would like to ask a question? If you do, please raise your hand. If you're coming in via phone, please do *9 on your phone and that will raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. Are we ready, Barb?
Jay, I'd like to move to approve the Chittenden Solid Waste District FY24 budget as proposed and presented.
Okay, we
This is David. I'll second.
have a motion from Bard and a second from David to approve the Chittenden Solid Waste District fiscal year 24 budget. Are there any other comments before we move to a vote? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, nay. Jeff, I.
David, I. Bard, I.
J.I. The motion is passed 4-1. Thank you, Sarah. We appreciate your work and the report.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is an update on the welcoming and engaging communities. Many members of the public have been probably following that this town of Richmond has been engaging with a number of state and local programs on the subject of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Former Select Board Chair June Heston, who thankfully is here tonight, and Josh Arneson have both been participating with the VLCT Welcoming and Engaging Communities cohort, which is a partnership with the Vermont Cultural Transformation Consultancy Abundant Sun, whose director is here tonight. And so, June, I would like to prevail on you. Would you be so kind as to tell us a little bit more about this and to introduce Jude?
I would be happy to. Thanks for the prep. So I'm June Heston and Jude Kelly-Smith is here. She has been guiding us through this program since last fall. And I met Jude for the first time, or saw Jude at a town fair presented by VLCT in 2021. And I was so inspired by what she had to say that I came back to the select board at that point and said, we need to be doing something here. And since then, the town did pass declaration of inclusion, but we've kind of been stumbling, trying to figure out what to do after that. And so we applied for this program, got accepted. It was of no cost to the town. And part of this program has been to do a survey of town staff and community volunteers. And so that we have asked, I talked a little bit about what the results were of the survey done across the state, and then what we might think about as we move forward. So Jude Kelly-Smith, Smith-Kelly.
Excellent.
You go right here, and then you'll be in front of the mic.
Okay.
Our slides are.
You have it.
Josh has some things up here, but before we go into slide mode, I just wanted to say good evening to everybody. It's lovely to be here. My first time in Richmond. So it's nice to close that gap as we go through. Thank you as well for enabling Richmond to go through the first cohort of welcoming and engaging communities. It's such an important project, and it's been an honor to have you as one of the 8 towns and cities that's been part of this work. I'll tell you a little bit about Abundant Sun and my background, because it's not, yes.
Excuse me, may I invite you to
Oh.
sit by the microphone, because
I'm ever
we're
so
serving
sorry.
the broader community. We'll all be able to hear you, but thank you. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that.
And the
we all get
microphone
the
is,
It's
I think-
on the table.
flat little UFO looking project.
No.
oh, here.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was.
So
thinking it
just
was
if you
that.
get to the table, and we'll all be able to see you, because you'll be picked up on the camera. Thank you.
Great. All right. So again, it was a big thank you, and thank you very much for directing me to that as the microphone. So as Abundant Sun, we've been in Vermont since 2015. And I would just like to say to the community that we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion to a certain extent. Right? The cohort is about welcoming and engaging communities. That's the objective. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has something to do with it, and it doesn't have everything to do with it. So from the background that we're coming to this from, is we really look at health and well-being. We're really concerned about everybody inside of the community. Everybody's participation, everybody's democratic participation, and everybody's ability to engage and to be who they are. So our work with you here in Richmond and the other 7 towns and cities that joined with us was really to help broaden out how you're even understanding what diversity, equity, and inclusion is and what it's about. So it has been a pleasure working with Josh and working with June to really help fan out this notion so that we can make sure that inside of Richmond and the other municipalities that we're doing the very best that we can. If we're going to be welcoming and engaging, it is really important to make sure that everybody who is serving this town and serving the community, each and every one of themselves, feels welcome and engaged inside of Richmond. Because the people who are already here do not already feel that way, it is illogical to expect people to make others who are not yet here feel welcome and engaged. That is the understanding, and that is how we've been working. So I will be very, very clear, that's our philosophy. That is our approach. With that said, diversity, equity, inclusion has a lot to do with who we are as people, as individuals, our own individual identities, the things that make us special. But it also has a lot to do with the groups that we're attached to and how those groups are either seen or not seen, or how they're either valued or not valued. We work very hard to stay away from political debate. My job as a social scientist is to do social science. And of course, you have to understand politics with a small p and a big P when you're going to be doing this kind of work. So thank you to everybody who's in the room, who completed the inclusion and belonging survey, because we did that survey so that we understand how are we going to work from the inside out into the community, and where are the strengths and the challenges that we have inside of Richmond as an organization in order to keep things moving and developing. As Jay says, we are a cultural transformation agency. Things are always changing. We've lived through 3 years of unprecedented change and transformation that we were forced to have to adapt to. Well, that was a good thing because we learned things. We learned that we could actually do things we never thought were possible. That is to us what diversity and inclusion is all about. It is about the capacity that we have to innovate. The capacity that we have to concentrate perhaps on people who are less advantaged or underrepresented, look at what their condition is, and realize that by looking at their condition and understanding how we can improve it, we actually are creating the capacity to improve everybody's condition. Right? If you have a group of, let's say, women who are working mothers and they don't have work-life balance, or they don't have the right working hours and they're stressed out, and we don't have flexible working policies for those women, if we can improve that policy, we're actually improving it for everybody. You're creating an opening that doesn't exist because you're looking to see where there's a barrier and a lack of flow inside the system. So we want everybody to begin to think more creatively and more broadly about the world of the possible, without feeling that the transformations we're talking about are going to take things away from people. They're going to harm people, they're going to devalue other people. So that's the kind of work that we've been engaged in with June and Josh, to really help the leadership thinking on this, to really help the critical thinking, to really help the decision making, and above all else, to really help the ethics, leadership, and governance. Because diversity and inclusion means nothing if we don't have great governance, if we don't have an ethical climate, and if we don't have solid engaged leadership. So that's what we were asking of everybody who's involved in the work that we're doing, whether it's yourselves as municipalities or not-for-profit clients here in Vermont or for-profit, that's the game. And it's a game that has everything to do with all of us. And so there we have it. All right, now I know we gave ourselves 45 minutes. That's just a bit of an opener so that you understand when I go through the data, what is sitting behind our thinking when we look at the data that we're presenting. Thank you to all of you in the room who would have completed the survey. Josh, if we can get into a PowerPoint presentation share mode, I can give you a little bit of an insight into what we've been doing with the Welcoming and Engaging Communities cohort. We had, as June said, we started in October in Town Fair, 7th of October. We came together physically, and then we had 6 remote 2-hour roundtables between then and today. So today we all got together again physically in the town offices of Middlebury, really nice offices, by the way, you have them on there, check them out. And it was just so good to feel as though we've created a cohort, a peer cohort of people who can live and learn and work together to mature and to build this work in a way that is building with everybody. So in December 2022, we've put together a report of all of the data that we aggregated across the 9 cities and towns that we searched. Okay, so Josh, if you go into the next slide, or I'll do it. No,
I got it.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to run it?
Yeah.
No, whatever's easier for you.
Thank you. I'm back at the mic. Okay, so we had the survey open from the 1st to the 21st of November of last year, and we received 519 completed responses. We scrubbed the data to make sure that everything's valid, and there are no duplicates, and so as we do that, we came up with 510 validated responses, which is pretty good. It's 98.3% of what had come in the first instance. So I'm going to give you today quite an abridged version of the data. And this is the data of all 8 of the cities and towns that participated. But then at the very end, I'll show you your Richmond data so you can do a bit of a comparison and a contrast as to where you are in relation to your other peers that are there. So if we go, oh, I am in control. Look at that, Josh, you gave it to me. So these are the different towns. So we had Brandon, Hartford, Heinsberg, Jericho, Middlebury, Putney, Richmond, and Williston. So you can see by numbers who participated, you're the second largest next to Williston. You had 89 people inside of Richmond who completed the survey. So that's good results. And we're very happy with the numbers because it gives us the validity and it gives us the reliability of what we're doing when we're looking at the data. So those are just respondents by town. If you can see on the far right hand, we've color coded because we've looked at employed staff, we've looked at elected roles, appointed positions, volunteers or interns, and people who might have more than one role inside the towns. So that just is a little chart of percentages of people in each of those roles who completed the survey. Now, if you see on the left-hand side, these are the 5 items that we measured for. There's a 6th item, which is an employment promoter score, but I'll get there in a second. But because we had such variation in terms of where people are with regard to their roles, we also wanted to see, well, is it relevant to everybody if we're asking them, what's the quality of your relationship to your supervisor? So what we find is, well, a lot of people sort of like, it's not relevant to me because nobody's looking after me. I have no supervisor. Is it relevant, the relationship that you have with your colleagues? Most volunteers and interns, we had 12 people say, nah, it's not really that important. And a few people from elected, appointed positions as well. I find it fascinating Are you treated with respect? That some people actually say that that's not relevant. Okay. You know, are you satisfied with the culture? Again, there are a lot of people who said it, and when you see it, it's a lot of volunteers and interns who are like, I don't care about the culture, doesn't have anything to do with me. Well, if it has nothing to do with you, then you actually can't take responsibility for it. And actually, if there's something that isn't right for some people, do you feel there's some place where you can go to set it straight? And then lastly, commitment to diversity and inclusion. For me, there was, what was it? I think there were 5 employed staff who said that wasn't relevant to them. They're working, they're staff. I think that's the right color. Yeah, it's like, what? It's important to all of us to come into a work environment, the way that we're treated, the way that we're valued. So I don't know, it's just curious to me as we went through, as we saw these things. So in terms of demography, these are some of the social categories that we asked people. Can you self-identify? Can you let us know which categories you feel you fit into? Because we want to be able to test to see if there are any statistically significant differences between people in certain categories. That's what makes this diversity data. You see, diversity data isn't a head count. It's not going, oh my gosh, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 white people sitting around the table. That's not diversity data. And we do too much head counting, which doesn't mean as much as sometimes we think it does. So we get this data so we can disaggregate. The good news is that people who completed the survey, those 510 valid responses, we had a large percentage of people who self-identified. The only mandatory field that we asked people to complete was what role are you? Other than that, nobody's forced to do anything. The survey won't stop if you don't fill it in, you know? So there's a lot of willing that was out there for people to disclose their identities, which is great because then it gives us good data to work from. Summary by stats. You don't need to go too far into all the different identities, but you can, obviously, we have a big narrative around how white Vermont is, 486 people. And that comes as no surprise, right? But let's be really clear. Diversity isn't just about race and ethnicity. It's ridiculous when people say there's no diversity in Vermont. It's so illogical. My head wants to just blow. I said, really? Wait, so we all speak the same language? We're all the same gender? We're all the same socioeconomic background? None of us has mental illness? What are we talking about? We cannot keep going around and saying there's no diversity in Vermont because we've got 486 white people to the small number of other ethnicities that went through this survey. It's a cop-out. So numbers are important, for sure they are. You know, age diversity, all sorts of things, disability, health, physical and mental, sexual orientation. But let's get into the meat of the matter. We're talking about inclusion and belonging in the context of making our communities more welcoming and more engaging. Okay, so where is the rub? These are the 5 that I was talking about. Strength of the relationship with your supervisor. There's 6. It's a hexagon. But if you start at about 11 o'clock with strength of supervisors and go around, those are the 5 items I was just showing. There's a 6th item, which is organizational advocacy. And that is basically, we wanted to know of our 510 valid responses, to what extent are people advocating for their towns and cities? To what extent are people saying, this is a great place to live? This is a great place to work? I wanted to know. We wanted to know. And one of the reasons why we wanted to know is, if you roll back and look at most diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives inside of municipal world, they have been focused very much on what do we do for the community? What do we do for everybody out there? How do we get them in the room? How do we get them as part of the decision-making process? And we are not thinking about the staff. We're not thinking about our people. In any other organization, it's going to be your staff are your greatest asset. But not here. They've been ignored in the context of diversity and inclusion. So the external focus, I think, is very detrimental. So the organizational advocacy score, we wanted to get a sense of that. Because you want advocates inside. There's no way that we're going to attract or retain people if people are walking around saying, nah, no good a place. Don't work for them. Nobody cares about us. Right? So that's how it's all set up here. Now let's see where your scores are. We've got a nice little odometer here. This is the aggregated. This is all the towns right now. So when we put together all of the towns, the score that we got is a 77. Okay. Now that doesn't mean 77%. This isn't a percentage. This is mostly on a 5-point scale. When we're asking people, what's your relationship to your supervisor? Do you think you have a good relationship? You can either strongly disagree, I don't know, I'm neutral. You can agree or you can strongly agree. So that's on a 5-point scale, right? You divvy that up into 4, what is that? 5, and we want people to say they either agree, which is a 4, or strongly agree, which is 5. And if it's 75 or above, we're in good shape. Because that means to say most people are saying they either agree or strongly agree with that particular item. So what we have in the aggregated cohort of welcoming and engaging communities is a strong 77, which leads us to almost acceptance. When it comes to, is the environment in which you're working valuing inclusion and belonging? Do you feel included and belong, and as though you belong there? So that's a good shout as a starting point. And this is where you can see the distribution on those items. So the top 5 is that 5-point scale. So where you see a lot of green is what you want. You can see around commitment to diversity and inclusion, we're getting a little bit more yellow, right? And a lot of people are like, I don't know. That yellow means I don't know where my town rests. And then the orange is I disagree, and then the red is I strongly disagree. So at a glance, we can always see which elements we need to work on, where we need to lift and raise the bar here. The organizational advocacy, there's a lot of red. And there's a lot of meh in the middle. And that in the middle stuff are people who aren't engaged. Now, all the scientific information, when you're looking at organizations and organizational performance, you need people engaged in order to get to top performance, whether it's being welcoming, engaging, or plowing the roads. I don't care what you have to do. But you need that engagement and that commitment and that lock-in. So where do we go in terms of overall? I'm going to move for a second. So the 77 below is the aggregated score for all of our 8 municipalities. So as I said, that's quite good. There's a current global median score that you see down the right-hand side of that. We're in the lower middle. It's not so bad overall because it's a 77.1 for the global median across all those items. But if you look one by one, you can see for Vermont, the 8 municipalities, we're actually in the upper middle when it comes to people's relationship with their supervisors and their coworkers.
I don't know exactly what that lot is, so I'll need to know.
And that's really good because, well, and it shows that, particularly at the time of in the pandemic, people's teams had to work, right? Like people had to really band together on a very interpersonal level to get things done. And so what we see reflected here in the VLCT data is also reflected in some of our other client data, those strong relationships, which we need to make sure we maintain. But you'll see we drop into lower middle with treated with respect, satisfied with culture, organizational commitment to diversity and inclusion, and organizational advocacy. So what's going on there and how can we bump them up? The treated with respect and organizational advocacy, it's at 75, so it's kind of okay. It's not in a red zone, right? We're a little bit weaker on satisfied with culture and organizational commitment to diversity and inclusion because it's in 70s. So the next step with all of this data is kind of going back in and asking, well, why? What was behind people's thinking when they answered the questions the way that they did? And where is there room for the improvement as we go? So I'm going to just go into the Net Promoter Score for a second. And it's at a +12. So it's in the positive realm, it's to the good. That means to say that we have more people who are promoters of their municipalities than there are detractors. So 37% of promoters, 24.7 of detractors. You take 24 away from 37, you get a positive 12. That's simple methodology, it's Bain & Co., it's used globally. This is within the context of being an employer. But you will also have perhaps similar experiences if you've been on the receiving end of customer service and people have said, you know, right? So we're in a pretty good starting point for doing this work inside of Vermont at Plus4. Now, I promise you, not all of the municipalities who went through this were in the positive to start with. We'll get there in a second. Like, I'm not going to reveal anybody else's data, but I'm saying, you know, it's interesting. And here's what I found super interesting. Oh, thank you. You're right. We broke down the employment net promoter scores by role. And what we found was people who are elected in our 8 municipalities were like, these places are great. 30, they were plus 39. You know, it couldn't be better. Elected officials. Appointed and volunteers were actually in the middle, you know? It's an okay place. I can live with it. It's not terribly bad, but it's not over the top amazing. And then look where we were with our employed staff. Flatline, absolute zero. It came out at a 0. And I thought, I knew it. Nobody's really caring. Nobody's paying that much attention to them. They're really not that engaged. That's the number, or lack thereof. So that's something to really pay attention to here, not just for, you know, in Richmond, but I think across the board when we're looking at our municipal life over here. And again, this is quite a long piece. I'm not going to go through all of the town data. We did see some differences between our towns that were in Chittenden County and outside of Chittenden County with net promoter scores. So that was interesting. But again, we've only got 45 minutes and I'm not going to go into all of this. Let me get to your specific data because that's really what you want to play around with and work with. Before I do that, I will share with you and with the public that we do a special statistical modeling, which is non-binary. Because I'm sorry, no, I'm happy to say that the world is not black and white. The world is not just females and males and men and women. We all have multiple identities. And it is foolhardy to just try and look at somebody for one particular aspect of their identity. I've worked in organizations at the time in which there was a lot, you know this, that when George Floyd was murdered, there was a lot of energy and heat around Black Lives Matter and systemic racism, and everybody in Vermont, mostly everybody's running around trying to find people to participate who hadn't necessarily participated before, which is all good, and it needs to be done. But at the end of the day, people are more than just one thing. And at the height of that crisis, I remember saying to some people in the Black and Indigenous community, I was like, so what else are you doing these days besides just being Black? Because that's all anybody was ever allowed to be. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but we're more than that. And when I had clients, you're like, oh yeah, you know, we need more racial diversity. And you chat with them and it would be so clear that they had a bias inside their organization around religion. They didn't actually feel comfortable with people who were religious. And I thought to myself, have you met any Black people? Because most of them are going to be religious. So you want to run around finding them for that purpose of race and ethnicity, but they can't bring their religious selves to work when they show up? That doesn't make any sense. So we have a non-binary model that helps us to look at identity overall. In terms of this data set, what came out as significant around inclusion and belonging is that you're going to be in a better position if you are working in Chittenden County. Right? So you've got a significant 7.7 points higher. That 74.5 in the middle is our interceptor. So that score, I'm going to move forward a little bit. That 74.5 is somebody that's outside of Chittenden County. They've worked for the municipality for 3 to 5 years. They are an elected official and they are straight with regards to their sexual orientation. We can predict that a person with that identity will score 74.5 overall on the index. That's our intercept. And then what you do is you go around the houses again. If you're working in Chittenden County, then you're going to add 7.7 points to that. If you've been in your municipality for more than 11 years, you're going to add 5 points to that. Because all those elected people as well tend to be above 40 and 50 and 60. So it comes out in the numbers. If you're employed, because you see the 0 for the employment net promoter score, we're going to take 5.9 points off of that. And if you're not straight, we're going to take another 6 points. And we can predict how you will be experiencing your town and your city. So this is actually fun stuff. I do this because I know it's fun stuff. I'm sorry. Well, some of it is, but there are people inside of it, right? There are people, there are numbers, and there's the quantitative stuff, but it also tells the qualitative story. It doesn't just sit in the numbers. We asked people, what are some of the things that you want to see more of? And these will be quite familiar to you. You know, we know there's a housing crisis. We want to see more housing that's affordable and affordable housing as well. Really importantly, outreach to low income and diverse communities. The narrative around socioeconomics is massive. And we can't be losing it to some of the narrow conversations that we have around diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the time I was doing some of my earlier research, and I was looking at the social justice index globally. The United States was so far down on social justice. Massive. It was, I can't remember exactly the number, but it was way down to 37 out of like 63 countries or something of that nature. And that's because we have such enormous economic disparity that we don't deal with. We don't have social justice as strongly as we think we do, or we should do, because we are too poor when it comes to dealing with poverty. We have to continue to elevate that conversation in relation to like low income and diverse communities. I don't even understand what that means. I remember working for some firms like women and diverse people. I'm like, what? It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, moving on. What else have we got? These are some of our challenges and strengths. So good response rate, lots of demographic disclosure, strong working relationships with supervisors and colleagues, good starting point for a +12, your net promoter score, and respondents within Chittenden County are obviously doing, you could see, doing stronger and better with regards to the overall scores. Where are our challenges? And think about this in the context of where you are here in Richmond. The cohort is overall in the bottom half of small to medium enterprises. Nearly a quarter of the cohort were detractors. So we got to figure out what's going on there. We know many of those are staff because they gave 0, those came in at 0. Respondents outside of Chittenden County are scoring lower into the minus net promoter score. And we did a little bit, I didn't show it to you here, but we wanted to see, does poverty have anything to do with that? Does geography and poverty? Now, we couldn't say that it does 100% because it was just a correlation, but we did, there's a visual where you could see on the economic index, the 4 towns that were part of our cohort were much lower on the economic index than the towns inside of Chittenden County. So there may be something at play there with regards to economics that we can address more realistically. So let's see you, Richmond. So remembering that your overall, the aggregated score of our 8 towns was 77.0, and you're at 79.7. So you're good, right? You're into acceptance when it comes to inclusion and belonging. Kind of like Switzerland.
We get that a lot.
Wow.
But you know, and it's a good piece, right? But you've got to make sure that everybody, like, how do you bump it up? How do you make sure that people who are here are coming into, you want to get it into acceptance because inclusion is at 100. Right? So there's still some distance to travel. But you're not all the same. Newsflash, right? And maybe by seeing where there are differences and different needs, you can begin to engage and bump up that score too. What have we got? So you can see in the VLCT cohort, you were a little bit lower, not significantly, with people's relationships to their supervisors and coworkers. Not a lot in it. It's in the 80s, so that's solid and strong. And your advocacy was just a little bit below at 76.7. But again, above 75, good starting point. And then let's look at this one. So where you see things in this sort of pink highlight, that's where we can find there is statistically significant difference between groups. So we can reliably say that in terms of supervisory relationships, it's good. Elected officials, the 11 who completed that and said that it was relevant to them, that's 100, like strongly agree. Everybody said strongly agree of those 11. You see, our folks who are employed make it statistically significant. Even though it's 80, it's significantly less than the other roles inside of the municipality. Right, so I wouldn't say that there's red warning lights that are out there, but there's a disparity. And if you flip over to the far right where it says advocacy, look where your employed staff are. Very significant. It's very significant. It's very significant. So that's why we have to pay attention. You can't just be externalizing these conversations about being welcoming and engaging and having DEI initiatives that are only thinking about the community and only thinking about attracting. You know, we've got people here that we're relying upon to do our jobs and to do our work. And so your data is really, really clear. Again, it's above 75. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was looking at the overall index score. It's below 75.
Yeah.
Right. So we know that there's something there that we can work on. And then go down. So nothing on length of service. Everything's pretty solid. You can see that people who are here for 3 to 5 years are just under 75, but nothing to be alarmed about. Males and females, nothing statistically different, just a little bit lower for people who identify as female. And then disability, it's not statistically significant, but there's a difference. You can see that, right? We had 10 people who identified as having some kind of disability or ill health. And what is so interesting, they have a better score. And that for me is like, why? Where does that come from? I want to understand that. So although it's not statistically significant, it is significantly interesting. And then you do have a statistical significance under the sexual orientation category, where people who identify as non-straight are scoring 70.8 when it comes to do you feel you're being treated with respect. There are 12 people who identified in that category. So we know categorically we need to pay attention to LGBT issues, needs, opportunities here inside of Richmond. So I think, my friends, that's it.
Okay.
There's the data.
We thank you very much for the presentation. Okay, so I'm sure we'll have some questions. I'd like to start with the select board. Does anybody on the select board wish to ask any questions? Jeff?
In addition to going through the EPIC program with June and Josh, Jay and I are going through the IDEAL program, which is related but different. Could you explain to me as well, how do you see the differences? What IDEAL is compared to this, and how do you see the differences?
Yeah, and I would love to know also, because you're experiencing it firsthand. I've only worked with Susanna on the outside of it.
She's
Oh
great.
yeah, I know her very well. We actually did the joint session for our second one. So I've known her for many years. We don't, as the IDEAL has started, we did a video, if you'd seen it, and the RCD did the video, and it's a braided approach between the EPIC series, which is part of Welcoming and Engaging. Because our work is so much around organizational development, our work is around leadership development as well. That's, to me, what I think is the big difference between the track that Ideal takes and the track that we're taking with Abundant Sun. We really want to help with critical thinking, with leadership skills, with diplomacy, with the stuff that keeps the machine working well. And I'm not saying that Ideal doesn't do that, but we don't have a particular focus on, let's say, racial equity. That's not our focus. It's part of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it's one strand in the non-binary analysis, right? So we've worked really hard, I think, with the cohort to really help mature the thinking and to also work in a way that we can have an inclusive approach to this without diminishing some of the real challenges that we still have for underrepresented groups. Right, so I would say that the Ideal program concentrates still very strongly on what are we going to do for the underrepresented out there as well, externally, in the public sphere. Our work is much more, what are we going to do with the folks who are in the house? And how do we lead and support them so that we have a better community?
Another difference that I see between these two programs is, my understanding is your program was a 6-month program. Sorry. My understanding is your program is a 6-month program with two of our at that time elected officials. And the Ideal program is more open-ended. It could go on for a while. In fact, it's undetermined how long it'll go on.
Right.
We took a similar survey.
Mhm.
I don't know if it was the same, but
We took the IDI.
Oh, okay, yeah, different. It was
different,
yeah.
but similar intent, I think.
Yeah.
And we're going through that process now of having individual interviews with Susanna Davis is the person
Yeah.
who is leading our program.
Mhm.
And we're going through individual interviews with her to refine our responses and understand our responses as individuals as well as the cohort.
Yeah.
So it's similar, different.
Yeah. Complementary. That's why we said
Complementary.
this
I
has
think
got to
that's-
be a braided approach.
Right.
And that's the language that we used when we spoke together. We've just finished the Welcoming and Engaging Cohort 6-month today, this afternoon at 2 p.m. exactly, in Middlebury. But it was really clear that we didn't want to end it, right? Because we just started building something, building understanding, building awareness. And so we're also going to figure out how do we continue? So that's to be determined, but yeah.
Hard.
I have a question. I don't know if this is a question for you or more broadly. How would we know if these initiatives or inactivities are effective or successful?
Well, I think it's what comes out of them. So we're very data driven. And so when we look at the data, and again, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's enormous. How do you even begin? Is it a headline? Is it an emotion? Is it one person's bad experience? Is it somebody's pet project? Like, where did we go?
Mhm.
I don't like to swim in that territory at all. So the data is really, really important. Start with the data. We know that there are areas that need to be improved and strengthened. Go in there, get the staff engagement up, elevate it, and then the data, you do the data. The data will tell you in 1 year or 2 year or 3 years if you're in any better of a position.
Mhm.
Right? It has to be a data-driven exercise. I get sometimes quite concerned about the volunteerism of the work because it is hard work and it should be treated like any other business activity with the same rigor and with the same discipline and the same accountability.
Mhm.
So I think that's.
And I just want to add, because that's a good question, because we asked that today at our program, because, Ted Brady was there from VLCT and he said, like any other training that they provide, like someone leaves that with a skill, like they've learned, Robert's rules, or they've learned,
How to color hair without making it green.
I don't know if they learned that, but in this program, so one of the things we talked about is having a roadmap so that each town isn't reinventing the wheel, but there is no map. And so we talked about how do we continue to come together since we're the first cohort to try to build the template for towns to use of changing systems. Really, it's about engaging leaders and community advocates to change the system. Because that's really where we want to be, is we want to know that if there's a problem in the system with being inclusive and engaging, then we need to change that.
And I want to say, I know we're to time, so I will disappear stage right. It is also about, we talked really specifically about, we need to ensure that our systems are more flexible. Right? The change comes in flexibility. The change doesn't come in blowing everything up.
Mhm.
And saying everything that we have right now is rubbish and we need to get rid of it all and do it all differently.
Mhm.
That's what people think it's about. And they get scared and they get defensive and, everything happens and the rest. That's not what this is about.
And another piece of data that we didn't talk about, but is important for Richmond is age. And so many of the people that responded are over 60. So I'm gonna say, because I'm in that group, we're old. And we need to figure out how to get younger people involved, because we're not gonna be here forever. So, that's a big deficit we have right now.
I want to take one question from Mary.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Mary Gold. I'm a townie. I've been here since 1959.
That's what I was thinking.
When you make a recipe, you have to have all the ingredients to have the proper outcome. So if you can identify it, I would appreciate you pointing me to part of the recipe. What do you see as the greatest elevator to assist lower socioeconomic folks that you identified, to raise them up from lower to higher? They perhaps are an underrepresented community, but can you identify one or two things that might help to elevate that community, to bring them into, I can't even say equity, because somebody's going to make $35 an hour, somebody's going to make $12 an hour. That's just the way it is. But is there something that you could point to, one or two items that would elevate the folks? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very, very important question.
Thank you.
To me, I think the starting point is human value. I think I'm reminded, and I don't know if this is going to be an exact answer to your question, but I'm reminded years ago when I was doing some diversity training for a town, and I had to go down to the depot at 6 o'clock in the morning to do some training with the garbage collectors. And I remember them saying, people look at us and they treat us like we're the garbage. And that has to stop, first and foremost. I think, I can't remember where I was recently. Sometimes we respond to people who don't have economic means as though it's some kind of disease that we need to stay away from because it's contagious. That's not good. So I think the first piece comes in the human element.
So is that from the individual or from the community? Because my guess in all of this would be education is the first thing to elevate.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Education for people around, but also how do we, because education also is tricky. What kind of education are we talking about, right? Are we talking about higher education and attainment? And because maybe people don't want the things that come with having wealth and money, right? Like, so not everybody's going to be the same, but we've got to figure out the work that we do. And I'll bring it back to, I talked about innovation, but this is about how do we help people reach their potential? How do we understand who every individual is out there and provide them with the resources to achieve whatever they wish to achieve, to have the sense of well-being and the sense of value and the sense of place that everybody deserves to have. So I think that there's a lot that we have to do to break down stigma around poverty. And that's going to come through education as well. And the rest I have to think about because it's such an important question.
Right.
And I don't want to just.
Thank you.
No.
Okay, so I want to thank you very much for coming. And I don't mean to, I'm not trying to shove you out stage right. What I do want to do is get this discussion to continue. This is just not the place, but there are a number of avenues available to people here in Richmond. For one, we do have the Richmond Racial Equity Group, which is not an official town committee, but we've been meeting for 3 years now. And if you're interested in it, we will try to post information about how to find us tomorrow in Front Porch Forum. But there's also a lot of interesting material on the Abundant Sun website. There's interesting material on the State Office of Racial Equity, thank you, website. There's a ton of stuff out there. And rather than saying, oh, just go Google it, I'll try to share some links tomorrow. But if people here in the town are interested in having, more discussions about this, meetings can be held to give everybody a chance to weigh in. Okay, so
Thank you.
thank you very much again. Okay, so I know many of you have been waiting for our next agenda item. Before we jump into that, I'm going to say something that a select board chairman usually doesn't have occasion to say, which is that I brought pie.
No, that's an expectation. We're expecting it.
There's chocolate meringue pie, which I made today. And there's homemade sourdough bread, which I made today back on the back table. There's plates, there's forks. Anybody here is welcome to help yourself at any point, because I really would just as soon not have to take it home. Okay, now that said, our next item of business is item C on our agenda. It relates to the question of prohibiting group sporting activities in Cochran Road. Now, I know that this topic has engendered a lot of strong feelings on many people's part. And before we jump into full discussion, I'd like to disclose a couple of things that I think might be relevant, because I've gotten emails telling me that, among other things, I'm a fascist for trying to ban all recreation on Cochran Road. Now, I know that that's an extreme point of view and many people don't share, but I would just like to share something if I could have your permission to share for a second. Okay, the screen that I'm currently showing you is from Strava.com. And if you've ever used Strava, you may know what a heat map is. This is my heat map from 2023 of my walking. Okay, that road that kind of sticks up here at the upper right, that's Murray Drive, that's where I live. That's an 8-mile loop around the town and back to my house. This down here is the loop to the Bolton Footbridge. Needless to say, I walk on Cochran Road. Okay, I am not somebody who's trying to stamp that out. And last year, this is my calendar for last year. I didn't walk a lot in February, March because I was really busy, but I walked 409 miles here in Richmond last year. Okay, so I am extremely sympathetic toward the pedestrians, runners, rollerbladers, snowmobilers, skiers, everybody who likes to get out of their cars and out of their houses. But that's not really the question before us tonight. The question before us tonight has been brought by an individual who sent in a letter and asked us to consider it, Mr. Bissett here. Mr. Bissett, in a nutshell, I'm going to call on you just a second, in a nutshell, is asking us, given that Route 2 through the village will be under construction this season, and therefore a lot of people will probably be diverting onto Cochran Road. He's kind of asking us, do we really want to have organized events, not people getting out walking, but organized events that will shut down Cochran Road for certain amounts of time? That's in essence it. Okay, so Mr. Bissett, since it's your proposal, could you come up and share what?
Jay, before you do that, can you pull the map you had up
Oh, yes, I can,
for
sure.
a second? Just might be worth noting.
All right, I'll get it back up.
I can only slow down my speech so much.
While you're working on that, can I set the stage a little bit?
Sure.
So for those of you who have not sat through the number of meetings here that I have sat through, there have been lots of conversation about, first, the work on Route 2, which is both repaving and the replacement of the bridge over the highway. Those will be significantly disruptive to traffic on Route 2 for an extended period of time. So if you don't know that, you should know that's one of the reasons that this issue comes up. Secondly, of all the topics over whatever it's been, 8 or 10 years that this select board has dealt with. I have gotten more phone calls and emails about the impact of recreational activity, most conspicuously on Cochran Road, than any other topic. So I would say that that's the broader context that you may not be aware of, that we are aware of, I think.
So thanks for bringing this map up. I only call it to our attention because as Jay has noted by his walking, Jay has covered the only 2 east-west routes through Richmond. People can't get on the interstate to cross town. They'd have to go east all the way to Waterbury or west all the way to Richmond. So what's labeled as East Main Street on this map, Route 2, will be under construction. So the default route then becomes Cochran Road. So we're talking about all the east-west traffic through town going on the Cochran Road corridor. That's all I wanted to point out.
Right. Although if you want to be strictly honest, you could go down Dugway all the way to Huntington and come back up, and no one's going to do that. Okay, so since this is your proposal, Mr. Bissett, before we open this up to the select board and to members of the audience here and at home, if you'd like to explain your proposal. And I will stop sharing.
It is just an idea that I had that I wanted to bring into the board. With the increase of traffic on the Cochran Road, it might be a good idea to cancel all organized sporting events where they take up the whole of road, or they were part of the road, okay? Closing the road, okay? And that's it. I apologize for stirring up the hornet's nest, but it's not the first time evidently. But anyway,
That's why we get paid the big bucks.
thank you. When you do a close of Cochran Road for sporting events, it's gonna force on more of the traffic onto a Route 2. Okay, that might impede a construction activity those days. Okay. If there's an emergency, okay, then you need to go down on Cochran Road and it's a closed, or you got a joggers on it, there by the thousands. Okay, there might be a problem. Okay. And it's and in my experience, everybody that says that we need either to share the road. I agree. It is the bikers and the joggers here that do not share the road. They are coming there right down your lane. Okay, here they do not get over. Okay.
Okay.
That's
So
all I gotta say.
questions from the board on the, or comments from the board on this topic, or for Mr. Bissett specifically?
Bart again, I just say, as people make comments, that I think of this as a concept, and not to blame or pillory Mr. Bissett for bringing this forward. This is a concept, and I think it's inevitable that we would have this kind of discussion. Again, there's a long story that many of you have probably not heard about concerns of parking and traffic and multiple use, even though I think without exception, members of the select board support multiple use of public roads. The question is, how do we manage this under this particularly trying circumstances when Route 2 is significantly disrupted? That's sort of the challenge for all of us, I think.
Any other comments, Lisa?
Jay, I don't know what the daily traffic volume is on Route 2, the normal daily traffic volume, but and I don't know what it is on Cochran Road. I'm sure it's a lot lower. Putting those two together is a bigger number than either one of those roads. And you do know?
Well, I don't know, but I go to Overrocker frequently.
Right.
And I'm down there for half an hour, and I probably see on a weekday afternoon, 40, 50 cars going back and forth. It's not huge, but it is regular. It is not what it was. I'm just gonna say, it's not what it was 30 years ago. There's a lot more traffic over time.
Yeah, David? Okay, so I'd like to. Okay, Aaron from MFCTV says, please move the mic closer to Lisa so she and Jeff can share. Okay, so before we open this up to public comment, there are a couple Oh, Duncan, okay, Duncan, do you have a technical question?
No, I just got a personal, yeah.
Okay, well, let's hold that just for a sec. We may want to turn that down. Okay, so there are a lot of people here and a lot of people connecting in, and we value all of your opinions. So I'm going to ask for there to be two ground rules tonight. One, when you're speaking, I'd like you to identify yourself, but also where you live, because we'd like to know, are we listening to a Richmond person or a person from, let's say, Colchester? We value everybody's point of view, but the Richmond voters are the ones that we're elected to represent. And the second thing I'd appreciate would be if people would try to keep their comments to under 2 minutes, because there are a lot of people here who would like to speak. For those of you calling in who might be on the phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 on your phone. Or if you're connecting via regular Zoom, you can of course raise your hand, but we're only going to call on people whose hands are raised there or in the room. So the floor is now open for anyone who would like to comment. Duncan, you had your hand up first, so you're welcome to go ahead.
Thank you, Jay. I'm on 2944 Cochran Road, and I just want to share some observations as, trying to teach my kids how to drive on Cochran Road. It is difficult. I do respect all the recreation that goes on there. I want to support that. But Andy's point is also very key in terms of this year of where construction is going to drive a lot of traffic. And I struggle with having to pass recreational people at times around Cochran Road, and teaching my kids when I'm even the passenger and they're the drivers of like, oh, how do you deal with it? It's not an easy situation. It's not an easy answer. But I do just want you all to consider of like how much traffic's there when you consider this. As a personal resident, I do not want to prohibit recreational activities on Cochran Road. That's what Cochran Road is great about. We can do it for each case at the select board level. I don't think we need to do a motion to prohibit activities for 2023. I respect Andy's suggestion, but likewise, it should be more case by case. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go to somebody here in the room, Linda Parent, and then I'll go to Sue Wells on the call.
So everybody can hear me. Here I am. My name's Linda Parent and I live here in Richmond. And the only comment I have about Cochran Road, it's great. People can get out there and exercise and ride their bikes and do their jogging. But those signs do say share the road. And they need to understand that if I'm coming from, say, West White Hill to the village, and this has happened, coming at me, 2 bicycles in this lane, 2 runners in this lane, and nobody was given an inch. And so I was the one that I was very willing to, share the road. But when a driver has to completely stop until those 4 people go past you, it's dangerous. I'm not even saying it's inconvenient. It's very dangerous because I didn't dare even try to move ahead at all. I came to a complete stop, and that was right over there by the horse farm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Sue.
Mr. Bissett brought this issue up to the transportation.
Sue, could you state where you live? I know where you live, but these other people don't.
Susan Wells on Cochran Road. Mr. Bissett brought this up to the Transportation Committee meeting last week, and we talked about this as maybe limiting the events to Sundays was one thought. Where there's nobody on the construction crews aren't there on Sunday, and so there's nobody stopping cars per se. So that was one idea, having them, because generally now the events are all on Saturdays, so we could just move them to Sundays. Thank you.
Okay, Sue, thank you for your opinion. Okay, I'd like to go to this lady here. You? Yep. I don't know your name, so come on up.
Oh, come on. My name is Hillary Holmes. I'm a resident of Essex Junction, and I'm the race director for the Round Church Women's Run, which right now is scheduled for a Saturday. I want to say to Mr. Bissett, thank you for your concern for all of the people who are using Richmond Cochran Road. I know it's hugely popular. I've held off on putting in my request for a race date because I've heard from my friends who are in Richmond that this is a hot topic issue.
I just want to offer that because I have so much respect for the people who live here and the work that you all are doing, we can work to be amenable, and whether that means we shift our race to a Saturday, a Sunday. I'm already planning on trying to run it earlier in the morning than we ordinarily do because it's getting hotter. Or whether that means we postpone it for a year, which is not my hope. Please don't do that. But also, if that is the best option, I'm going to respect that because Richmond is a treasure for everybody in Chittenden County, and I want us to be good neighbors and have good relationships with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your
Next,
time.
I'd like to call on Town Manager Josh Arneson. If you could talk about that.
Yeah, just as the conversation develops, I just want to remind people that the work that's scheduled on Route 2 in the center of the village is scheduled to be night work as well. So the road will be torn up throughout the day, but I don't anticipate actual construction activity. They could change that, but that was what they've been telling us for a number of months now.
That mean it will be open during the day then?
Yeah, it'll always be open. It's like, right, Route 2, my understanding, it'll always be open. It'll just be reduced to one lane at times.
Okay.
But we've had many conversations about the fact that they're doing work at night versus the day and the disruptions that will cause residents on Route 2. So I just wanted to make sure we added that to the conversation that they won't actively be doing work from what we can see on a Saturday morning.
Okay, I don't see any hands on, I do now. Para, you are next.
Just want to add to what Josh is saying there. If they're going to continue from the Snipe Ireland area of tearing up Route 2 all the way to where they're going to be building the bridge, then yes, it does go down to one lane traffic. And yes, it does reroute all of that Route 2 traffic through Cochran Road. So I don't think it's just the village work that they're doing this year. I think they're also doing the other work that they stopped because they thought they were going to get all the way to the fire station bridge area this past year, and they did not. So they have to go from Sniper Island all the way to the fire station. I want to commend the race group, the women's run group, who is willing to move to a Sunday. I want to commend the transportation group for recommending Sundays. The construction crew that were right in front of my house on Route 2, they did work on Saturdays. So I strongly recommend, if Richmond doesn't want to put a moratorium on closing Cochran Road during other days of the week, at least put it to move everything to Sundays, please. It's about public safety. And having driven Cochran Road because Route 2 was closed or impassable, once they start tearing up that road and they put those stones down, it's popping tires. People aren't going that way. They're going around, and I just want everybody to be safe, please.
Before I call on Francis, Josh has another thing he'd like to share.
So just to help frame the conversation, as I did see in the chat, somebody asked, how many events are usually planned in Richmond? So I look back at the last number of years, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've had we had 4 events. One of them already is not coming back. Just sort of give a recap. We have the Midwives Move Mountains 5K Fun Run and Walk, usually on a Saturday in early October. They get about 35 to 40 competitors. They typically do not ask for a road closure because their turnout is only about 35 to 40. It's in the morning. They can usually manage it without. We have Richard's Ride, which is already requested Saturday, May 20th of this year. That's adult bike riders departing Cochran Road. There's no requested road closure for the adult ride, but there is a children's ride from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. They do request a road closure for. And then there's the Round Church Women's Run, which is usually the last Saturday in July. Typically request road closures for Far Road, Thompson Road, starting about 8:25, and Cochran Road eastbound only, so we leave one lane open from about 8:25 till 9:15. And the Rooted Vermont Ride, which has been here the last 2 or maybe 3 years. It's the larger bike event that brings people throughout the whole weekend. Starts at Cochran and uses multiple roads. That event is not planned for 2023.
Okay.
So it's really 3 events that we've out of the books.
Okay, Francis Churchill.
Francis Churchill. I live on Cochran Road in Richmond, and I want to talk about So we just talk about safety. I think this proposal is not about safety. Safety is about risk. Risk is the likelihood of something happening times the consequence of it happening. The consequence, this doesn't change the consequence of a motor vehicle, non-motorized user impacting. So it only could change the likelihood. We've already heard that the bigger issue is the 2 and 3 and 1 people who don't share the road, as we said, and this doesn't affect that at all. So if we're not, this proposal doesn't change the risk. So I'm saying it's not about safety. It may be a useful thing to do for other reasons, but it's about inconvenience, not about safety. If we're really concerned about safety, we would look at things that the National Transportation Safety Board would say would be, can we do something different with the road? Well, we don't have the time, money, or space to do that. So we would look at how do we increase the time that a driver has or that a pedestrian has to see the pending collision, act upon that, and then get to a stop or move. So that would be reducing the speed limit. If we're really concerned about safety, we'd look at that. The other thing that can impact safety is culture. So before we offhand say that share the road is not something we're really doing, we could look at putting energy into increasing the culture of sharing the road, which means sometimes driver has stops, means cyclists who are allowed to take the lane are not required to take the lane. Those kinds of things are culture initiatives we can try.
Mr. Churchill, you've spoken a lot about safety. Could you share with the board your professional qualifications?
I'm the director of environmental health and safety at the University of Vermont. I'm not
He knows what
speaking.
he's talking about.
I'm not speaking for the university here.
Right.
Put that up there.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody on the Zoom who would like to share? Anybody want to put their hand up on Zoom? I'm seeing some messages in the chat. I don't see anybody raising their hand. Is there anybody in the room? Penny?
Hi, I'm Penny Rand. I live at 19 Church Street, just across from the town hall. And thank you for your concern. I concur with Francis that I don't think this is about safety. And it concerns me a little bit because I think we're a town that wants to encourage our people in our community to be healthy. And going out for a jog or a walk or a bike ride on Cochran Road is a very logical place to go because Route 2 is much less safe to go on. And there are not a lot of options because the roads in our community are very, very narrow. Cochran Road has been the most logical place, and that's why most everyone is there. Because it's relatively flat, it's easy, and for the most part, cars can see pedestrians on the road because it's fairly straight, with the exception of that kind of one hill in the middle. I will say that for me, there's a little bit of confusion of the request because I wasn't sure it was just about events. I heard that it was large groups of recreational activity.
That's not what Mr. Bissett's request was. It was
Okay, I
about,
saw a different letter, so maybe I'm looking at a different letter.
maybe.
Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to just add is that I do agree that I think recreational users, there are some recreational users that ride or walk or jog on Cochran Road like it is a bike path, and it isn't a bike path, it's a roadway that pedestrians can use, but it's still a roadway. But I would hate to see our community ban something like that that's so important to many, many people, whether it's older groups or younger groups or athletic groups that are meeting. And sometimes it is an inconvenience, but it's also something that represents the culture of our community to see these people recreating. And it's a wonderful place to do it. I agree there needs to be a better way to somehow manage it, if you will, but closure doesn't seem like the right answer. I'd love to see our our community think more about how we can get more places in our community to provide safe places for our people, our community, our residents to recreate. So
Mhm.
thank you.
Parenthetical note, I do have the letter up on the board. The last sentence is the key one. An individual can use the road, walk, jog, or bike, but no group should be allowed to use or close Cochran Road. So I'm reading this to be specifically about group events where the road is actually closed. And that's what Mr. Bissett, you want to comment on that?
Yes. Okay, there's open, there's two individuals, okay, that walk or jog or bike.
Probably should.
Could you come up to the mic?
You know,
Come up to the mic. Thanks, Jeff.
okay, because it is easy enough to drive around them. But a couple of Sundays ago, there I encountered a larger group. Okay, they're taking near the whole road. Well, not the whole road, they're my lane. Okay, so I had to veer over.
Mhm. Okay,
They did not oppose the road. They did not put out a signs advertising here that there'll be a group on the road, such and such a time. That up and caught me off guard. There is a policies in a place here that a group is supposed to post the signs, I believe. So.
okay. I'd like to go to Ann Nauman on the Zoom.
Thank you, Jay. My name is Ann Nauman. I live on the corner of Baker and Tilden Avenue. I am a pretty avid cyclist and walker on Cochran Road, and people are talking a lot about what it means to share the road, and I thought it might be useful to actually read some of the statutes about bicycles and cars on the roadway. Is that okay if I do that?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm going to read Vermont Statute Title 23, Chapter 13, Subchapter 03, Use of the Roadway. And then it's number 1035. A vehicle shall not be driven on the left side of the center of the roadway in overtaking and passing another vehicle or vulnerable user proceeding in the same direction unless authorized by the provisions of this chapter and unless the left side is clearly visible and free of oncoming traffic and vulnerable users for sufficient distance ahead to permit overtaking and passing to be completed without interfering with the operation of any vehicle or any vulnerable user approaching from the opposite direction, or with the operation of any vehicle or with any vulnerable user overtaken. In every event, the overtaking vehicle shall return to an authorized lane of travel as soon as practicable, and if the passing movement involves the use of a lane authorized for vehicles approaching from the opposite direction, before coming within 200 feet of any approaching vehicle or vulnerable user. So for better or worse, the way I read this is that the legislature is prioritizing the safety of vulnerable users, which are cyclists and walkers, over the convenience of drivers. And I get that that's really annoying at times, but that is what the law says. Another one I want to read is, let's see. This is motor vehicles, operation of bicycles, electrical personal assistive mobility devices, and play vehicles, riding on roadways and bicycle paths. And it has to, I'm not going to read all of it because it's too long, but a person operating a bicycle on a roadway shall exercise due care when passing a standing vehicle or one proceeding in the same directions. Bicyclists generally shall ride as near to the right side of the approved area of the highway right of way as is safe, except that a bicyclist shall not ride to the left or in the left lane when preparing. No, a bicyclist shall ride to the left or in the left lane when preparing for a left turn at an intersection or into a private road or driveway, approaching an intersection with a right turn lane if not turning right at the intersection, or overtaking another vulnerable user. So my experience has been that when many cars don't seem to understand what the law requires of them. People talk about sharing the road, but it seems to mean that the cyclists and the walkers get out of the way. For the record, I generally try to ride as close to the right as I can. I am lit up like a Christmas tree. I have a mirror so I can see people coming. And I never ride two abreast. Despite all this, there are many times when cars are passing from both directions, when there are bicyclists or walkers on both sides, and the statutes clearly say that that's not allowed. I'm going to read another part, which basically says.
And
Yeah.
in the interest of time,
Yeah, I can just post them. I'll post them in the chat.
if you would be so kind as to do that. Thank you.
Yes, but
I'm gonna,
can I just make one more point?
sure.
The one point is that what is required of the law is that when you're passing a vulnerable user, that means walkers, horses, cyclists, you are required to leave extra room to a minimum of 4 feet. So if you have somebody on the road, if I'm riding on the road, it takes me at least 3 feet, just the width of my bike and my shoulders. And then you have to give 4 feet, that's 7 feet. So there's not really, if you have that happening on both sides of the road, there is not room to follow the law and have cars passing in both ways when there are vulnerable users on the road.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Okay, before we take anybody else from the audience, I'd just like to do a little procedural stuff. The item on the agenda is a request from a resident, spoken for by some people, spoken against by some people, but no actual action on the part of select board is required this time. Before we keep on going, I just would like to ask, is there any member of select board who wishes to make a motion on this topic?
I just make a comment. I think if the transportation committee discussed this, and we tend to be receptive to recommendations of committees. If they suggested we divert people to Sundays because that's a better day, I think we should entertain that as a practice. I'm not sure we need a motion, ordinance, or decision about prohibiting activities per se.
Yeah.
And I think we'll have the opportunity to exercise that option with the next agenda item.
Right.
So I think that's a reasonable way to move forward.
And Lisa?
Jay, I'm looking for degrees of something. Can we, lower the speed limit? Can we provide police presence during what might be busy times? All those things. I'm not ready to say yes or no to using the road. So let's look for modifications first.
Okay, so in the interest that the select board does not wish to act on Mr. Bissett's motion, I would like to move on to the next agenda point, but this is, as you've heard, probably not the last time this will come up. The next item on our agenda, coincidentally, is a request of approval by the Richard Tom Foundation bicycle event. And the request, pardon me, I just closed the wrong window, is to close Cochran Road from 11 to 1 on Saturday, May 20th for the Richard Tom Foundation bicycle event. And I believe we have people here who wish to speak to that. So you're welcome to come up and speak to that.
Good evening. I am Cochran Rd. I live on Stage Road and I use Cochran Road often for both driving, biking, and running. And I'm also part of the Richard Tom Foundation Board of Directors.
My name's Tom Broido. I live in Heinsberg and I'm here representing the Richard Tom Foundation also.
And we understand that had we sent our message just a touch sooner, we might have been the agenda item ahead of time. So we are certainly entertained by this. One of the things we do want to clarify is that we've done this before. The police have been really supportive and helpful and super invested. We only want 2 hours, 11 to 1. And that's when the vulnerable users are usually below the age of 10. And so just the concept of right and left is still not really clear for many of them. So that was the main push, to have it closed for just those 2 hours with the police presence to keep the children safe, the ones that are just figuring out how to ride bikes on the road. Some of them go on the river trail, but most of them go right on the road.
And it's not closed to residents. Residents are allowed through we hire Richmond police and they inform them there's an event going on. And in response to some of the questions earlier, we put signage on both ends of the road. We put notices in the local papers. And we also send, at your request, a letter to every resident and every side road resident a month ahead, informing them of the event.
As well, our event is on the 20th of May. We're kind of hopeful that's before the construction season. We're not sure when construction starts.
We put a request into V-Trans and they weren't able to answer us when the section between Four Corners Richmond and Four Corners Jonesville is gonna be occurring.
Okay, Bard?
I think there was some chat about when.
It said April
construction starts.
2nd, it's starting at the Conant Farm. I
Well, that's
saw
where the
that sign.
sign is, but I'm not sure where it actually starts. So I'm not, literally, I'm not sure where it's gonna be when. Again, for those of you who are not close students of these meetings, one of the things that we know is we are significantly understaffed in our police department, like very significantly understaffed. So I sort of asked Ben, one of the things that I contemplated in some private conversations is should we ask during this specific time when we're understaffed, should we ask people having these events to provide their own sheriffs or police as for traffic control? And I realize I haven't talked to anybody else about that, but I just thought of that as an idea that might help to move this forward.
Okay. Lisa, Jeff, David, questions? Jeff?
So I'd like to understand a little bit more about what the Richard Town Foundation is and what this event is for.
Sure. Go ahead.
All right, thanks for asking. So, Richard Tom Foundation was founded, this is our 8th ride that we've done out of Richmond. And our goal is to promote healthy lifestyles and also safe roads. Richard was an individual that was killed by a motorist in Heinsberg 9 years ago now. And so we do things like we have a Bike for Friends program. So this is our one fundraiser of the year. And with the funds we raise and donations, we have programs where we provide bikes to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to get them. We get used bikes and we have partners with local shops that then restore those bikes and give them away. We have programs where we provide scholarships for kids to go to mountain bike camps at Catamount Outdoor Center and with Little Bellas, which some of you are familiar with, which is for girls to provide leadership skills for young women. And that's our primary goal. We also work with Local Motion, the local TED cycling group in Burlington, which works with Department of Transportation, V-Trans, and also with Department of Ed on their driver's ed program. And they have a program where they bring trailer full of bikes to schools, and then the phys ed teacher in that school does a week of safety training with young kids in elementary school, so they learn to ride safely. And we provide support to Local Motion for that. So that's where we spend the funds, and this is our big fundraiser. I will add, we are, the Sunday thing is a good idea. I'll just let you know for us, we've scheduled this thing a year ago. We have vendors, caterers, local businesses, Stone Corral, all lined up for Saturday, the 20th. So if you're going to ask, could it be changed to Sunday? Maybe. We have Cochran's reserved, the ski area reserved, we have the caterer reserved, we have the beverage vendor reserved. All of our participants have this date on their calendar. It's a big graduation weekend, and these vendors are very busy. It's hard to get them that weekend anyway, because it's UVM graduation. So I'm not going to say it's impossible to move to Sunday, but it's not ideal for us, obviously. We're only 2 months out.
Is it fair to say that this is not the Tour de France race where, people are competing, heavy?
No, it's not a race at all. It's a ride. So actually, when we have the start, we clang a bunch of bells, we send them out of Cochran Road, and with the adults, like 15 of them take off. And then like the other 10 that are like, oh man, they started, we better get on our bikes. And then the next 10 go. So the groups that head out that are adults on the bikes don't take over the road, and they're really staggered. Some of them even leave early because they know that it's going to take them a lot longer. So those starts are really inconsequential when it comes to taking over the whole road. It's really just the 2 hours where there's some kids out there that we're most concerned about.
Okay,
So this is like the fun run at 4th of July for us.
Yes.
okay. There's a question in the chat from Lori Dana. Lori has asked just a question, not that I'm against this, but why can they schedule without approval from the town before they promote this? Thoughts? What if we
Well, why
said,
do we
what would,
schedule
what
it?
if we
Well,
said
because
no?
this is the 8th year we've done it. We've been before the select board. There's been discussion
Mhm.
and it's never been an issue. And you need to schedule these things in advance for the vendors and everything else. Now, if you request next year for us to come 6 months in advance or whatever, we'll do that. But this is how we've done it now for 8 years.
Okay. I'd like to call on Sue Wells on the Zoom.
Thank you. I think it would be important to know when construction is starting because it is amazing. The traffic just doubled last summer because all the cars were coming down Cochran Road. So I'm not sure where they would go if the road is closed and there's construction going on Saturday. I'm just not sure how that would work. But anyway, I just think if we could find out when it was starting, that would be very helpful.
Art?
Yeah, I'm just gonna observe to Susan's point, it's probably difficult. I don't think we want to find ourselves in a position where Route 2 is closed and Cochran Road is closed at the same time. And there is like no way to get there from here. So I think it's a plausible question to say, when and where do we anticipate Route 2 will be closed so we can make an informed decision about what the impact on Cochran Road
Is Route 2 going to be closed or is it just
or
one lane at a
significantly
time?
changed? Yeah.
One lane will be kept open, construction will be going, and there will be times when there will be flaggers out closing both directions. Because sometimes they have to move dump trucks and earth movers.
For a short period.
Yeah.
And
You know, I live in a-
there's only so many places that police, rescue and fire can go. So it's not Burlington where there's 6 or 8 roads. There's always an alternate route. There's kind of 2 roads that go this direction. It's Cochran Road or Route 2.
And it's
Right.
not closed to emergency vehicles. Richmond Rescue is actually at our event because they use it to promote CPR to everyone who's there.
But for what it's worth, I live on Murray Drive, which is in the section of Route 2 that was repaired last year. And there were quite a few times when I was actually going into Burlington to my office where I arrived 20 minutes late because Route 2 was literally closed for 20 minutes because they just decided to get all their earth mover and backhoe moving done all at once instead of doing little closures. And so we can't guarantee that that won't happen this time.
My only point is it would be really useful if we're making a fact-based decision to know what does the Agency of Transportation plan, when and where.
Yeah, Josh and I are both looking at the exact same page, the AOT page where they posted the construction updates last year. There is not a dang thing on here saying when they're starting this year. They're just millions of very nice photos saying, here's what we did last time.
I contacted the person at that email and they then forwarded it to the project engineer and they didn't get back to us. I said there was a meeting tonight, but I didn't get an answer.
To me, there's lack of communication from V-Trans.
Okay. We have a question from Mary Hool in the back of the room.
Very cool. Since the folks here have.
Mary, you're
committed-
not under a mic, so can you come up?
Since the folks here have committed their support groups for the date they cited, perhaps it's early enough to recommend to V-Trans that they not do anything on that day on Route 2, so that there will be Route 2 opened and that the foundation can use, yes, I live on Cochran Road, but they can use the road according to the schedule that they've set up a year in advance. V-Trans could be a little more flexible.
Okay.
Don't make me go there.
Okay, so does the board wish to make a motion tonight on this topic?
Jay, I got a question
Lisa?
too. How many bikers are you talking about?
That's a good question. So
And how do
we pulled out the data before the meeting. We had 226 last year. And for the period of the road closure, that's what we call the 5 and 15 ride, there was 46 people above the age of 17 and 30 under the age of 17.
Does that include kids also?
Yeah, so the 30 are under 17.
Right, how
Lots
long-
of, and most of those under 17 are 10 and under.
How long does it take to herd all those people? I assume they go down to one end, turn around.
They,
That's right.
yeah, they just get to Dugway Celebration Station. We give them some candy and high fives, and then they come back. For some of the kids, they don't even make it the whole way, but most of them do. And it's about an hour at the most. So, you know, we close it a little ahead of time and a little afterwards for the stragglers that are coming and going. And every now and then, some of them start on the river trail, and then they hit pavement at some of those intersections, and they're like, oh, this is easier, and they stay on pavement. So sometimes we're not really able to gauge when they're on pavement and when they're on the river trail. Even though we try to promote the get onto that river trail piece.
Yeah.
Some of them are just too young.
Are you able to manage the groups in terms of starting and finishing times? I mean, can you?
We
We
do,
estimate that.
yeah, we do start them together at around 10 o'clock-ish, 9:30, 10. We start them. And then we do have some adults that are involved that are volunteers for the Richard Town Foundation that are like the herders that come behind them and make sure like, oh, you know, this isn't working, that's not working, this is your right, that's the left, stay this side, and kind of manage them a little bit that way. But as I mentioned, they sort of splinter a little bit, and then there wind up being some lags in between the groups.
And they're not riding alone.
Yeah, they have adults with
Yeah.
them in most cases. There are a couple of them where an Richard Tom Foundation volunteer will sort of act as the guiding adult.
Jeff, one more question.
Do you tend to have police or some kind of presence on both ends of Cochran Road?
Yes.
To notify?
Yes, in the past, we've had somebody right at the intersection of Dugway. And then right at the intersection of Cochran Road. That's the only section.
That may be a
And-
little harder to pull off this year.
Yeah.
Well, we can hire, we like to use local vendors, and we use the Richmond Police Department. If that's not possible, we'll hire somebody else, and you can direct us to do that if you like.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so does the board wish to make a motion?
Jeff, this is David. I move to approve the Richard Tom Foundation bicycle event and the closure of Cochran Road from 11 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. on Saturday, May 20th, 2023, with the provision that the Richard Tom Foundation provide adequate law enforcement and traffic control for the event.
Okay, we have a motion from Doug.
Doug,
You just called me Jeff.
sorry. Won't happen
It's
again.
awesome.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Okay, if seeing no further discussion, please state your name and your vote.
This is Jeff, I.
I'm thinking.
David, I.
Bart, I abstain. I still don't feel like I have the information about road closure to vote in favor.
Lisa?
I abstain.
Jay votes aye. So it passes 3 ayes and 2 abstains. But we would like to get more information.
One more question. There's no guarantee that this construction will be done by the end of the year. Would you consider doing Sunday next year?
Yes,
Absolutely.
with a year advance notice, absolutely, that's.
Okay. So thank you. Now, at the very,
Would you like us not to request Richmond Police, or should we ask them first?
You'd be probably wise to look elsewhere.
Okay,
right,
well, we've already sent them a couple emails and they haven't responded, and I live here, so I do understand it's a little tricky.
Thank you.
at the
Thank
very end of
you.
the meeting, a gentleman asked for a new agenda item relating to a non-binding resolution. Did you have a chance to note that down?
Safe sharing of roadways resolution.
Okay, so at the very beginning of the meeting, there was an agenda item proposed asking the town of Richmond Select Board to vote and endorse a non-binding resolution regarding safe sharing of roadways. Is the gentleman who made that request still here?
Yeah.
Would you like to speak to that? And please, I forgot your name, so if you'll re-identify yourself.
Sure, yeah. Nick Ponzio, Richmond resident. I live on Cochran Road, the Jonesville and Cochran Road. So you have something that I've prepared, and I'll read off of this. As I said, I live on Cochran Road and I drive and recreate on the road literally every day. For the most part, motorists are very respectful of people running, roller skiing, walking, and biking on the roadway. And that is one of the many things I love about living here in Richmond. I share the concerns of my neighbors about increased traffic due to the construction project on Route 2 this year. and the public safety risk this presents. I understand that the town is working on traffic calming measures, and I appreciate and support that. Vermont law does provide for coexistence of vehicles and people on the roadways. As a participant mentioned earlier and read some of it, I'll abridge it here. The operator of a motor vehicle approaching or passing a vulnerable user shall reduce speed and increase clearance to a recommended distance of at least 4 feet and shall cross the center of the highway as provided in section 1035. And in 1035, it says a vehicle shall not cross the center line in overtaking and passing another vehicle or vulnerable user unless the left side is clearly visible and free of oncoming traffic. So, having been passed by thousands of cars while walking my dog, exercising, and visiting with neighbors on Cochran Road and other roads throughout Richmond, I can relay that without a physical barrier, clearance of 4 feet between a car and a person is grossly insufficient to convey the sense of safety to me, the vulnerable user. When driving a vehicle, I always yield at least 8 to 10 feet of clearance and or slow down, and I encourage others to do the same. This effectively means crossing entirely into the other lane or coming to a stop when oncoming vehicles make it unsafe to pass a vulnerable user. So I ask for leadership from the select board tonight to support a common understanding of how our roads harmoniously may be used by different types of users and how to apply Vermont statutes. I propose the select board adopt a non-binding resolution to the effect that 1, Richmond encourages drivers to yield to vulnerable users with a minimum of 8 feet of clearance. 2, crossing a double yellow line is permitted in the presence of a vulnerable user, provided the other side of the road is not occupied by a vulnerable user or oncoming vehicle. 3, the only way to safely pass both a vulnerable user and an oncoming car or a vulnerable user in the oncoming lane is to come to a stop until one of the parties has passed. And 4, the duty to yield rests entirely with the operator of the motor vehicle. Vulnerable users have an equal right to use public roads, but do not pose a hazard to other users in the way that motor vehicles do. The responsibility is not on the vulnerable user to remove themselves from the road in the presence of a motor vehicle, but instead it is the duty of the operator of the motor vehicle to yield to the vulnerable user per state law. Thank you for your consideration and service to our community.
Okay, so I would like to make a proposal, given the length of the request, that we add this to next time's agenda, but I don't see it as terribly controversial, but it's a fairly lengthy thing and I didn't have time to type all that down. Are people okay with putting it on the next time's agenda?
My view is that we have to, that this was not warned, that nobody could
Indeed.
read this
Right.
in advance of the meeting.
But if you-
so it should appear as a
Right.
an agenda item.
But if you could email the text of that to Josh and myself,
Can I get one thing?
sure.
People really shouldn't walk 3 abreast, 4 abreast, like I've seen, and neither should bikes. Cars
Yeah.
don't do that, so bikes shouldn't.
I'm just gonna share one story, driving my car below the speed limit and you know where the trail comes down off the hill onto Cochran
Right by
Road?
the cemetery.
Somebody came out at 15 miles an hour, about 20 feet in front of my car. Slammed on the brakes. That would have been an awkward moment because I don't know how, like, it was fortunate that I was able to avoid that vulnerable user. But it illustrates, I think, why some people have become frustrated at specific events. And I recognize it's a minority of bicyclists or cyclists, but that behavior sort of impugns the appreciation of many of the drivers, because it's not just coming up behind them, but some of the other behavior, 2 or 3 abreast where they don't separate, and people popping into the road as I just described.
Now, see, if you'd taken my suggestion, we were gonna put a ramp at the bottom of that, and a big net on the other side of the road, it would have been, I don't know, what, $20? David?
Just to piggyback on what Bart said, I'm going to preface this by saying the vast majority of the people I see are very respectful, but I've seen people hear me coming and then they ride 2 abreast or 3 abreast. Just to make a point, I was at the Four Corners in Williston. I've shared this at this table before. I had my top down. It was about 7:30 at night. Somebody purposely blocked the road. They were turning left and no, they were turning right. They swung out and they blocked the road. And took an extended amount of time to make their turn, and takes a lot to get a reaction out of me, so I'm patiently waiting. And then just before they turn, they flipped me the bird and yelled, "Share the road!" But again, the vast majority of the people are very, very friendly. It's like Bart said, it's the ones that stand out that think of that taste.
I do see that we have some hands up in the back of the room, but as this is going to be an item on our next time's agenda, I would ask you guys to come then. But I do think, I'm not trying to quash discourse on this, because I think this is a topic that I don't think there's anybody in town, except possibly the people who are in the cemetery, who don't have an opinion on this. And so I'd like to give this the adequate amount of time it deserves. Okay, so our next item on the agenda has to do with the consideration of setting a date to hold a special meeting to vote on moving town meeting day to the first Tuesday in March. You may recall that this came up at our last meeting a week ago. There were some technical questions about the petition, which our petitioners have returned with an attempt to address. And so I would like to leave the floor to Marshall Paulson and Linda Parent to give us an update.
Well, hi,
Welcome. Hey.
thank you for your time tonight. Good night. Since we met last week, Linda and I have worked to get clarification on the process for the request that the petition embodies. And Linda's prepared to present a request for the select board to consider as a motion. Without further ado, let's do that. If you have questions, we'll address them.
Well, we did give you the petition that was signed by 189 people that wish to have the business meeting of the town meeting revert back to the Tuesday morning instead of Monday night. We understand that now. That was not the way to do it. We have talked to Secretary of State's office and League of Cities and Towns, and they suggested that we present to you folks to approve an official warning for this meeting. We have, if you do it tonight, the vote has to be taken between 30 and 40 days, meaning between April 20th and May 1st. We have reserved the community room at the library. The school was not available, so we're going to have to put a big sign on the door saying this meeting is here. We plan on advertising that it's going to be at the community room. And the people that are there in person may vote. It's going to be a voice vote, which it has to be. So we're just asking that you would approve and sign the official warning that I sent to you.
One of the interests of this request is while it's fresh in our minds from town meeting, a time of year where we could, if the select board is willing to address the question, plan a meeting within 30 to 40 days, which is what the statute requires, and that we have made steps to make a space available in the library next door on April 29th in the morning.
Which is a Saturday.
Correct.
It is 9 o'clock on Saturday morning.
Is that during,
Good, Jeff.
is that during school vacation? You know?
Don't know.
Don't know.
I think it's the last week and I'll find out.
Okay,
It's not that week?
I think it's the last week in their school vacation, but I'll find out right now.
okay. So before we jump in, are you all set, or do you have any stuff you want to share?
No, I think we've
Okay.
shared it all, just that the school is not available that day.
Okay.
Short and sweet.
Okay, so before we open to the select board, I want to just mention a couple things. I've had people email me asking about this, but thinking that it was in regard to moving the vote on the budget from voice vote to Australian ballot. This is not what they're requesting, but it is something that seems to also be swirling around out there. For those of you listening at home and who are wondering, we had approximately 130 actual voters who voted on the budget out of 3,377 registered voters. David, how does that work out math wise?
That would be roughly 4% of the.
Roughly 4%. And so my question is simply, is there interest in we have to honor your request because it was petitioned, but do we also want to take up at that meeting the question of moving the budget vote to Australian ballot, and can we legally do that?
At the meeting that you're gonna work with the commission?
Since it would be one meeting, because,
Yeah, I don't know.
okay, well,
And to answer Jess, sorry, that is the last, so school break is that week, and it would be the last week in the school break.
okay,
Right, it's last weekend of the school vacation.
okay. So if we did not act on the budget, which is fine, because it wasn't what they requested, our next opportunity to consider moving the budget to Australian ballot would be at the following town meeting.
Or you could call a special meeting to consider moving it to Australia. I just don't know if you can combine.
I'm not trying to. It was just because people asked, some of you may have been asked. Jeff,
Related to the school question, what, did you have an opinion on whether that would affect turnout or not? That it is school vacation that week?
Well, no, we don't think that would make a difference in how many people come to the meeting. It's just that we could not physically use the school building that day.
We did consider and kicked around a number of options of an, for a request for a time and date for this meeting, including evenings, weekends, what have you. And in every respect, there was a, oh, what about? Little leagues probably going on, trout season's open, et cetera. So it was difficult for us to find that magic day of which we might anticipate a larger number of voters attending.
okay, I have another technical question. The warning does not explicitly state that we all know this is the way it works. Voters must be present in person to vote. They cannot vote via Zoom. Do we wish to state that in the warning? Are you amenable to amending your warning request to state that? We don't want people to think that they can stay at home in their pajamas, drinking coffee and vote.
Well, it says that it's gonna be, the following business from the floor.
Absolutely, but as JPs, we know that sometimes people get confused.
If it's statutorily approvable to do that, I certainly would agree. Folks may want to attend by Zoom to witness it. But clearly,
But we don't plan on
oh,
doing it.
I'm standing back, excuse me, stand corrected. Nope. Live and in person.
And that will be, and we plan on advertising this and on Front Porch Forum, and we aren't quite sure how else, but in that it will say there will be no Zoom option. You must be present to vote because it has to be by a voice vote.
Okay, that sounds fine, because yes, you can say it must be by voice vote and we will have cookies. I mean, it doesn't have to, cookies do not have to be in the warning.
Right.
Okay, any other thoughts?
I vote for 5.
It's over there, dude.
Hot 5.
Okay, Aaron Farr in the chat says, judging from the turnout at town meeting, I don't think the school vacation will be a problem at this meeting. Unfortunately, it didn't seem like there were many young families involved in town meeting, which is perfectly true and unfortunate. Any further comment from the board before we possibly entertain a motion to accept this?
Jay,
Mhm.
this is David. I move to call a special meeting on April 29th to consider moving the town meeting day to the first Tuesday in March.
Okay,
Sorry, is there
motion.
an opportunity? I had my hand raised. Is there an
Oh, I'm
opportunity?
so sorry, Marcy. Actually, let's get a second and then the floor, we can still take comment. Do we have a second? We have a motion from David and a second from Lisa. Please, ma'am, go ahead and share your comment.
Hi, this is Martha Marcial, Richmond resident. So I did attend town meeting. I think I was one of the younger ones there. And I am a working parent. And so personally, I do think that if the hope is to gather more younger individuals, it might be a good idea to offer the meeting on a non-school vacation weekend. I know it would definitely impact me and it would be a meeting I would go to. I really appreciated having the evening town meeting. And I would hope that maybe giving a little bit, another year or two of attempting it and maybe doing a little bit more outreach and advertising about the evening meeting time might bring in some younger voters and residents. I would just like to see it be tried more than just once. And also have the potential of this meeting not be when many younger families are out of town.
Right.
Well, that we more or less have to have the vote, but do you wish to entertain the possibility of moving it out 1 week? Or is this week the
Well-
week you're committed to?
This date is what is within the timeline if you sign this tonight. We all know why it ended up on Monday night. It was voted in 2020 and then we had COVID. So we went right ahead with it. I did see Martha and her mother there, very nice. But we got down to, there was approximately 130 people that voted on that town budget of over $4 million. By having it 2 nights, that meant 2 complete early morning to late night for the justice of the peace and especially for me. And then it was very, very difficult to get people to work both times.
But I'd like to add one thing. Mary Hool brought cake.
She did, yes.
It was good cake.
But that's why we're thinking of, and the people that came, most of them were the same people that would come on Tuesday morning. And if,
Okay, David.
I just remembered, isn't town meeting the first Tuesday following the first Monday in March?
no,
It is not, okay.
Interestingly, and in 2016, March 1st was a Tuesday,
Oh,
and that was
okay.
town meeting day.
right.
Huh.
And in,
Why we met 2 weeks in a row.
and then we have in state statute, Title 55, Title 17, Chapter 55, 26
Section
word,
2.
it says the first Tuesday.
Okay.
That first Tuesday after the first Monday is for the general election,
Oh, okay.
which is the federal
I knew it
election.
came from somewhere.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor, moved by David. Sorry, we have another. Oh, Kara, please, by all means.
I got to sit beside Martha. Nice to meet you, Martha, at town meeting. I just want to comment on the fact that town meeting time period is also during school vacation too, that Monday night. So I think you might get the same kind of turnout on April vacation as you might have in February vacation. So I would want the select board, and I don't know when you're going to do this, to also look at the issue of having a townwide vote on the budget and not have 103 people, to be more inclusive, not have 103 people decide on the full budget. And I don't know when you would take that up. I know it's probably not enough time, like you said, to do that now, but I would like to have us look at that and not have to go to petition to do it. We should ask the voters.
Yeah, Kara, I would agree. I think though that since that's not an issue that the petitioners brought for us, that will have to be a later meeting. That's just, I'm not an attorney. Yeah.
Well, it was more the question, does it have to go to petition that way, or is that something you guys will
No,
discuss?
I
at a
the
later-
select board can bring it up. I
Okay,
probably
okay,
will.
thank you.
Everybody else does.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion,
Discussion
Marshall.
still open?
Yep.
Just a couple of comments as I've done some deep diving on this question. And both of these are personal observations, not backed up with any quantifiable data whatsoever.
But
But the first is, I have yet to meet a person in our community who doesn't have a strong feeling about this question and issue. And I suspect, and I'm guessing now, that the attendance at any sort of special meeting, I'm thinking are highly likely will have already made up their mind about the issue. Which may make for potentially a brief meeting. And the second is that in the little that I have looked around the state and spoken with folks in other towns who have attempted Monday night meetings, Saturday meetings, there has yet to be that magic day and time that dramatically increases the attendance of town meeting. Thank you.
And we did notice the person who got it on the ballot showed up to vote at 5 minutes to 7 on Tuesday.
you're being generous. I think it was 6:58.
But who's counting? Okay, we have a motion from made by David Sander and a second from Lisa Miller to, could you, I can read it. The motion is to call a special meeting on
April 29th.
April 29th to consider moving town meeting day to the first Tuesday in March. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, aye.
David, I.
I reluctantly, however, since I will not be here on April 20th.
Is this your big tour of France and the Low Countries with your band? Okay, and J.I. So we thank Linda and Marshall and the people who signed the petition, and we look forward to seeing everybody at the town meeting on that date.
Okay, so you have.
Thank you for your time.
petition to sign? Yep.
So I have a strong opinion, you just never know what it is.
Right.
Jay, I have a point of order. So I'm not exactly clear whether I'm going to be here either. It's close to, lack of quorum for the select board. Do you need a quorum for the select board in order to hold this meeting?
Actually, I don't know for sure that question, but this is a meeting that requires a moderator. Either our moderator or in the case of the moderator is not available, a select board member. Or in the event of a select board not available, that select board person then can appoint a moderator for that day. To my understanding, that is the only requirement of the special meeting.
We will check with our attorneys just to be
Certainly
sure.
discussion, correct? I mean, there's no amendments or.
Um,
or be made.
Well, they can give their opinions if they want.
A moderator, certainly, their task is to address just those questions. If there is an amendment.
There could be amendments, couldn't there? Could there not?
It is a question submitted to the voters. Whether they're. So, good question. Would you like to appoint a committee to try and answer?
Josh, we'll talk to our attorneys.
Yeah, I think Clint Buxton, our moderator, sure, but we should be prepared for that. And as far as if you need a select board quorum there, we should ask the attorneys for sure. But I think this would fall into a meeting of the people, not of the select board.
Right.
So I think it might be that you don't need this form of the select board, but it's the people making the vote. The board's not taking any action.
But I've just checked my calendar. I can be there.
Mary, well, I would ask that Marshall consult the authority rather than paying money to the attorney, because the authorities in Montpelier that you might contact will have the answer, and we don't need to go through the attorney. Let's save a few bucks.
I will note that that does conflict with Vermont's most important event, the Vermont Maple Festival. So I would encourage us to get that over with quickly so we can all drive up to St. Albans.
Okay. We only have the room from 9 to 11 anymore.
Okay, so there will be time to have pancakes.
Yeah.
Actually, could you have pancakes that day?
Maybe.
Our interest is.
Who do we know who could bring real maple syrup? Somebody who doesn't.
Okay. Our next item of business
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
on the agenda, Jeff, is this yours?
Actually, Lori Dana is going.
Lori Dana. Lori Dana is with us remotely, I believe.
Yes, I'm
Lori,
here.
Lori. Okay,
Yes,
Lori, there is a request from,
The Town Center Committee.
yes, if you'd like to go ahead and speak to that request.
Okay, so what we're asking for is for the select board to approve an expenditure from the Town Center Fund for some work that we are able to get done on the library building this summer in July, planned for July. We have a contractor. This would be the work that we will apply our Division of Historic Preservation grant to. So the work is on the slate and woodworking on the two towers. The spire, the lower part of the spire and the square bell tower. This is the work that back in 2018, Jan Lewandowski said was urgent. Because he was afraid that water was going to be penetrating into those two towers. So we have a total cost for the project of $54,700. Plus, we think we should add a 15% contingency fee We would add $3,000 for our owner's rep to manage this project. And that, so you see the total cost is $65,905,000 minus that $14,801 grant. So the final cost to come out of the town center fund would be $51,104.
Okay.
Mhm.
Jeff,
I'll move this so that we can discuss it. I move to
Mhm.
approve the library building exterior repair work as presented in an amount not to exceed $65,905 to be paid for with funds from the Town Center Reserve Fund and $14,801 from the Vermont Division of Historic Preservation Grant.
This is Bart. I will second that.
okay, we have a motion from Jeff Ford, second by Bart Hill.
What I can do is to speak to this, is this is a longstanding work that the exterior of the library is needed. It's one of the reasons for being for the town center committee is to look at deferred maintenance on the library as well as this building. We've had a great deal of difficulty trying to find contractors for this particular type of work. We succeeded in doing that, and feel lucky that we've been able to get him lined up for this summer. So rather than delay any further, the town center committee believes that this is a project that's worthy to move forward this summer.
Any further discussions? As is noted in the memo, the money is available in the fund, which exists for this purpose. And it is a reasonable request. We have a motion second before us. Does anybody want to discuss it further? Are you ready for a vote? Oh, Kara, go right ahead.
I just have a question on the $3,000 management fee. Who is that for? What is that for exactly? I didn't quite understand that when you were presenting. I'm sorry.
That's okay. The town has been working with an owner's rep, Jay LeBear. I think he's on the call actually. And he has been providing the management and supervision of the projects so that Josh or Rebecca don't have to do that. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to speak any more to that.
Can I just ask a question on that? Now that I know what it was, the question is more, is this an individual that has a level, when we have our staff managing something, there's a level of insurance there? Is this somebody who has some kind of insurance to accept this management fee for? And I'm not being difficult here. I just want to make sure we have done things in the past that have not been done properly and had no recourse to do anything about it. And I'm not saying that this is one of those situations. I'm just trying to check.
Jay, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. That was Kara. That was asking the question. Kara, yeah, I'm an LLC and I have a full complement of general liability and professional liability insurance for this specific type of work.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you've given this town of Richmond a COI for additionally insured on this project?
Yes, I have.
That is beautiful to know. Thank you so much. No further questions. I'm very excited that we have an expert to oversee this. Thank you for doing it.
I'll just further comment that one of the things that the town center committee has become painfully aware of is that because we don't really have a facilities division or department within the town, that our buildings have suffered some deferred maintenance. We've been working with Jay now for several years on various different projects in both buildings and have been very satisfied with his work. So we feel grateful to have his help both professionally and he personally has been a tremendous help to the committee.
Thank you. I agree, Jeff. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and second. If you are ready for the vote, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, I.
David, aye. Jeff, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Thank you. Our next item of
Thank
business
you.
is also relates to, go ahead, Vern. Okay. Our next item of business is also related to the library. It has to do with a grant called the Paul Bruhn Historic Revitalization Grant. This is a grant from the Historic Revitalization Subgrant Program as administered by the National Park Service, Department of the Interior. There is $625,000 to preserve and restore buildings and community gathering spaces of economic and social significance in rural communities. Examples of work they support are roof repair replacement, structural repairs, facade, window, and door restoration, repair, and code improvements. The application deadline is March 31st, and applicants will be notified by May 1st of whether they received a grant. The town of Richmond will be the grant applicant. Lori Dana, chair of the library trustees, and member of the town building committee, is writing the grant, will work with Josh to submit. They are hoping to get $100,000 toward the deferred maintenance in the building, which includes repair, restoration of wood siding and wood detail, restoring the 5 historic windows and door, and painting the entire library building. This work is necessary to ensure that the envelope of the building is impervious to further damage from the elements. They have a contractor's estimate of $429,000 and $429,600 for the entire scope of work. The funds must be used before December 31st. A note that is not and is not directly related is that they have requested matching funds. The grant does not require community match, but having one strengthens the application. The library trustees have requested funding from the town ARPA committee to defray the cost of the project. This would be the community match, so I'm assuming that that would be $100,000 from the grant, $100,000 from ARPA, and that would leave $229,600 to be paid for from the town center fund.
This is Lori. Can I speak to
Right
that
ahead,
a
Lori.
little bit?
Yeah.
There is also $26.4 million set aside through the Vermont Department of Libraries for grants coming up in the next 2 years. We're in the process of filling out the required needs assessment. To apply for those grants, we have to do a needs assessment before we can even apply. That's also due on the 31st of March, and Rebecca and I are working on this, the needs assessment for the department. So we're hoping that between the Bruhn grant, some ARPA money, and the money for one of these 2 grants, we may be able to foot the bill for most, if not all, of this work. There's still no deadline for either application deadline or when they're going to decide on the Department of Libraries grants. Part of that money is ARPA money, part of that money comes from HUD.
Okay, so we have a motion in the memo that states, I move to apply for the Bruhn grant to help fund repairs to the exterior of the library. Does anybody want to move that motion?
Oh, I definitely will. I move to apply for the Bruhn grant to help fund repairs to the exterior of the library.
We have a motion from Jeff Ford. Do we have a second?
It's Bard, I will second that.
We have a motion from Jeff Ford, a second from Bart Hill to move to apply for the Bruhn grant. Is there any further discussion?
I'll just say one thing. So Lori Dana is on our committee, the Town Center Committee. She's been a champion of applying for grants. She really has done quite a bit of work in this realm. We have applied for the Bruhn grants before. I mean, we are, I think, perfectly suitable for what the mission of the Bruhn grants are, but it's a very, very competitive program. So we're not sure we'll get it. And this is coming from the trustees, right? Not the Town Center Committee. But the Town Center Committee is supportive of it. You know, if we got it, we think it would be, you know, really, you know, a great thing for us. So figure there's no harm in trying.
Okay, I'm looking to the Zoom. I see no hands up. Does anybody on the Zoom wish to ask any questions? Mary? Okay, so no questions. Are you ready for the vote? Okay, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, I.
Jeff, I.
David, aye.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, our next item is me. One of the things that we received input from the townspeople on during the solicitation of ARPA suggestions had to do with town beautification and town gardens. And this was a fairly nebulous concept that various people took various ways. There is an existing town community garden that is on the Bresser's property at the corner of Thompson Road and Cochran Road. It is currently administered by Hannah Harrington and Jim Feinson. It is not full. It could probably hold 4 to 5 more users. There is, of course, always a possibility that the Bressers could decide that they have a better use for that land. It might be something to put on town land. It's something to think about. The other item that many people are interested in talking about and working on is town plantings. Fran Thomas and quite a few other people actually used to work very hard 10 to 20 years ago on maintaining the plantings at the town welcome signs on Volunteers Green. I think there's a certain person who's worked on the plantings around the post office entrance. I can't remember her name. And so on. There's a lot of stuff around the town that used to be maintained and to a certain extent still is maintained, as witness the post office plantings. But no one individual is ready to go out there, take on the world and say, oh, I'll do all of the work. Can't imagine why. So that would be, those two topics would be the remit of a hypothetical gardening committee. I have received, I'm going to go ahead and share on my screen, since you may be wondering who these people are that are ready to do this. I've sent all of them an email, although I did not send Mary the email because she wrote me after the request after my email had gone out. But whoops. And let me share that. You can do it, Jay. Okay. So I've heard from all of these people indicating that they would be interested in being part of a town gardening committee. Some are interested, I think, more in maintaining, publicizing, and developing town vegetable and flower gardens and herb gardens. Most of them, I think, though, are more interested in the town beautification aspect of the project. Now, at this time, we're not looking to appoint them to the committee because the committee does not exist. But what the proposal that I'd like to put before us is that we create this committee. We, as part of the usual soliciting committee members that happens in the spring every year, we ask people to submit letters of interest. Once we see how many letters we get, we would appoint some of the members, some of the requestees to 2-member terms and some to 3-member terms, so that going forward, they wouldn't all be expiring the same year. And we would then look to them to, unless we felt like picking somebody, they could choose from among themselves a chair and a vice chair. They could then put together a budget request for what they think would be appropriate to pay for plantings or fertilizer or tools, or I don't know if they have to bribe the lawn gnomes to leave the plants alone, whatever it might be. We have money in the budget, although we're not talking millions, but we have some money in the budget for stuff like this. And so the motion that I'd like to, obviously there's room for discussion, but the motion before us tonight, if we make the motion that's actually in the memo.
Want me to move the motion?
Yeah, if you'd like to go ahead and move the motion.
Jay, this is David. I move to form the gardening committee and to ask for applications to fill 2 3-year terms and 3 2-year terms.
Okay, so I had a
Bart,
letter.
I'll second it.
Okay, Barb will second that. We have a motion from David Sander and a second from Bart Hill. At the time that this agenda was put together, this was put together on the assumption that I had about 5 people interested. It's now up to 11, but of course we don't know that they will all submit letters of interest. And some people may say, I'll be happy to volunteer. I don't want to be on a committee. So at this time, 5 seems reasonable. And if we do get, I don't know, 9 people who want to be on the committee at a future meeting, we could always vote to expand the committee. So is there any questions or comments? Mary?
Always. Thank you. Very cool. I would suggest that perhaps
not limiting the number of participants, but if you're going to set up a chair and a vice chair and have a couple of other members, that we allow for other folks to come in to be, I don't know, ad hoc members or something, because there's going to be a group that's organizing, that's setting things up, designing things, but then we need all the worker bees too. So being inclusive of that, and I don't think we can always count on the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or whatever scouts available, but opening it up to the folks that were on the list, I think, we'll have, some that can do it, some that can't do it, and I think that would be a benefit to the town overall. Thank
Right.
you.
Right. I think there will likely be some people who volunteer but don't want to be tied up in committee meetings. Bard?
My one suggestion is, as it forms to define a purpose or scope, like what does this group do and what did they not do? Because there can be either a mission creep or.
Right. Actually, that's a very good point. Let me, it's probably here in my email where I can find it. Okay.
And where I was going is not to interfere with the motion that we could charge this group with coming up with that if you want. Or
Right.
do you want to do it in then?
No, I think they could come up with it. I'd just like to share what
Envision.
what I sent the people earlier today, and I am not sharing, and besides, it needs to be bigger.
I'm no help. I would only ask you for help.
Okay, let's share that. Okay, so this short, terse, and to the point note is what I sent to the proposed members today. Basically a twofold charter. Planting and maintaining decorative and ornamental plants at Volunteers Green, Town Center, Welcome to Richmond signs, and so on. And up above, town gardens, vegetables, and all, and kind of just fighting the status quo that, as I said earlier, there is a town garden. It has more room as it currently stands. And then there's other stuff like there is shared space used by the senior center. There's community raspberries. They'd like there to be a shared cutting garden, perhaps a herb garden. And I want to stress, I am not proposing that this committee come in and shove Jim and Hannah aside and say, hey, we're taking over, because they've been doing a fine job. I'm hoping Jim and Hannah will be part of this. But there may be ideas, like I said, to expand and grow it. And then the other is essentially the town beautification project. So the charter, as I see it, would be those two items. But once they meet, they may wish to add a third item I haven't even thought of. But this is kind of as at ab initio what we'd be looking at.
Thank you.
Jeff.
Well, so I would add to that, and I'm in support of this motion and this committee. And I think their first order of business is to come up with a charge. And present it back to us as to what their charge is, so we could understand what it is.
Right. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion and second. Please go ahead and state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Thank you. We will have Duncan include this in the mailings listing committee members, and I will also let the people I've emailed with earlier today know that this is when they can send in their list of flowers they like and what color hats they like to wear or what have you. I said that if you write in and say, I like tulips and impatiens, I mean, okay, that's good. That's your application. It can be more verbose if you want. I'm just trying to say it's not going to have to be your 7 previous employers and who you went to high school with. Okay. Our next item of business. This is the fun one. Consideration of setting a hearing date for amendments to the zoning regulations for village residential / commercial district and gateway residential / commercial district and associated amendments. At the last meeting, we took a stab at the dartboard and said, what about April 10th? The library is not available on April 10th, and Camels Hump Middle School does not like meetings to run past 8 p.m. So if we started at 7 and went as long as we well might, we would turn into pumpkins.
I don't like meetings that go past 8.
Yeah, well, at least there's pie this time. There are dates in the memo: Tuesday, the 18th of April, Monday, and Tuesday, the 24th, 25th of April, May 2nd, which is a Tuesday, May 8th, which is a Monday, May 9th, which is a Tuesday. Those dates are available at the library. I'm agnostic as to which one we pick because I should be in town for all of them. Does anybody wish to discuss this? Make a recommendation of a date?
This part, I'd recommend the 8th or 9th
Of May.
of May.
That would be the second Monday or the Tuesday after the second Monday. Matthew, I see you have your hand up.
Hi, yes, I would propose, you guys originally were going to have one kind of ASAP, and I would propose to try to keep it as soon as possible. I think you all understand if you keep pushing it back even to May, assuming there's that public hearing, there can obviously be, obviously more deliberation and whatnot. And, if we're going to get any kind of reasonable, if this is going to pass this year, the proposed changes, sooner is better from a construction standpoint. As soon as, best case scenario at this point, if you guys do it in early May, would be that it's more than likely that construction for any project is pushed through August, most likely at this point. So that would just be my opinion of this. I think there's a lot of people that are clearly looking for these changes to be made to the zoning regarding housing and density. And it kind of speaks to a lot of the other issues that we already discussed here, actually, in one form or another. So that would be my opinion. I do have a personal stake in that as well. Not going to lie about that. I have a growing family, and it would quite benefit me to be able to build a house on an existing plot of land we already own. So anyways, that's my piece of that.
I'll be clear, the only reason I say the 8th or 9th is I will not be here any of those other days.
You're not here on the 18th?
I don't know if I will be able to participate.
You'll be somewhere in downtown Paris? I've decided Bart is going to France. I don't know why. David, what are your thoughts?
I don't have any preference.
No thoughts. Okay, Jeff.
I would really like Bard to be here or we could hold it in France. That would be.
Okay, can we have an amendment to that? Okay, Lisa?
There's gonna be a lot of stuff that comes out of the hearing, and there's gonna be things that we need to reconsider, get extra information on, whatever. It's going to go ways before we have a zoning ordinance or changes after the public hearing. The sooner we can do it, the better. And if it's because of Bard's convenience, that's a good reason.
Well, to that point, it's a sound one. It may be that it's more than one event, in which case it would suggest we do it ASAP.
Because there's just, there's 50 people for and 50 people against, and they're all,
Screaming.
they're all right.
Do you, Bart, question, do you anticipate, if you actually are in France, it might be inconvenient to join a Zoom, but where you actually might really be, would that be a place where you potentially could join a Zoom, or are you going to be away from technology altogether?
It's really unpredictable at this point.
Okay, I personally would be inclined toward holding it sooner rather than later and saying, Bard, watch the recording. That's just my 2 cents, because I kind of sympathize with what Matthew has to say. Kara, what are your thoughts?
I just had the question regarding, I agree sooner rather than later is definitely better for most people, but my question came back to what you all decided. Are you deciding at the public hearing if the select board's going to take a vote? Have you already decided that this isn't going to be put in front of the public to have a vote? Where were you at with your decision on that? And I'm not trying to, I'm just asking. I wanted to know what was decided.
At this time, all that is required for this to become ordinance is for the select board to approve it. It's not currently in the form where the public would vote yay or nay. The purpose is to make sure that we make an informed decision. And if people were to come to that meeting and say there's something the planning commission, despite all their majestic work, and they really did a lot of work, but if 10 people show up and say, but you forgot this, it would give the planning commission a chance to consider, well, is it better to amend the proposed ordinance to add that, or should we go full speed ahead? I think that's really kind of what we're looking for. Also, people would have the opportunity to say, please, for the love of God, don't approve these. And we should solicit their input, but at the end of the day, it's really currently up to the select board.
I think you have that, then if you're doing it in that manner, and that's why I was bringing up to make sure I understood what manner you were doing it in, If you're doing it in that manner, then the select board has the ability to amend at the public hearing. It doesn't go back to the planning commission. You have the ability to listen to the public and make any amendments that you want, because I've seen this select board do that before. So that was all I was asking was the select board voting? Because if they were, if people had any recommendations, that was their opportunity for them to try to convince you or whatever they wanted to do at that select board meeting. So thank you. I just wanted to understand the process so that maybe anybody listening would understand it as well. Thank you.
Okay, it would probably depend on the nature of the advice we received in the request. If it was something relatively simple, like all houses must be painted purple, just saying, and we wanted to approve, that select board could elect to make that change on their own. But if it's something a little more nuanced, we might agree that it should go back to the planning commission. Until we hear the suggestions, it's hard to say. Mary? Yeah.
Oh, yes. With a hearing date, how far ahead do you have to publish that? That's the only consideration that I would have when you're talking about sooner rather than later for having a meeting.
It has to be in the paper 2 weeks in advance.
Okay, so that's the only consideration. Thank you.
Get us time by the 18th.
Thank you.
Here, there's one, I'm sorry, there's
Go ahead.
one, we just hired a town planner, Keith Osborne.
And
so-
he starts
Next Monday.
next Monday.
Yeah, okay, I'm sure he's got an ear to the ground on this already, but he hasn't officially had any participation in that. So, that's a little bit of a wrinkle that may not cause anything, or he may need a little time to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully he's available for that date. I have the date.
That's-
Sorry.
yeah.
I know Virginia said that the chair of the planning commission, she's available for any of the dates. And this is the sort of her baby.
And Tyler?
Tyler's in zoning. He doesn't say that.
I know, I just thought he might want to.
He's probably familiar, he's up to speed with it.
Yeah, he shows up sometimes. He came to town hall in Killington. There weren't a ton of zoning administrators there, so
he likes the education of it for sure.
yeah. It would be, and this is not a motion, this is me my preference would be the 18th of April, just because I'd like to, there may be multiple meetings. I'd like to get the ball rolling sooner rather than later, but that I am one member, I am not.
That's a good date. Mhm.
If the 18th is something we want to potentially take a vote on, we would need a motion to that effect.
Ms. Bard, I move to set a hearing date of Tuesday, April 18th at 7 PM at the Richmond Free Library for a public hearing on amendments to zoning regulations for village residential / commercial district and gateway residential / commercial district and associated amendment.
Jay, this is David. I'll second.
We have a motion from Bart Hill, a second from David Sander. Is there any other discussion from anybody on the Zoom or here in person from the board on this motion? Seeing none, and please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bard, aye.
And Jay, aye. Are you Steve?
I am.
Okay, okay. On our next item of business, this is not anything to vote on. It's just to bring the board and the public up to date with relation to the electric vehicle supply equipment station. That's here at the town center. So I will turn the floor over to Steve Bauer. Do you need to share anything?
No, do the members have a copy of the report?
We do.
With your package?
Would you like to share that?
Yeah, I'll share it.
Very impressive, Steve. You definitely did a lot of work on that report.
This, the charging station down in the parking lot here went in a couple of years ago. And so this report is for the second year of operation. For those, just as a reminder, it was put in with a grant from the state, which paid for, I think, 90% of it roughly. It has 2 charging heads and the town charges 19 cents per kilowatt hour, which covers the cost of electricity and the 10% fee that's paid by the vendor charge point. So it's revenue neutral for the town. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of quick things and then just open it up.
Is this what you want us to be showing?
Might have. Yeah, we'll start with this. Just a couple key points from the usage data here is that the number of charging sessions did go up in year 2, 67% higher than in year 1. And in terms of gasoline saved, that's about 539 gallons. I'm not going to read the whole chart, but the fuel cost to the users was about $1,364, meaning, of course, they had to pay for the electricity, but they didn't have to pay for the gas, and it saves, it's much less expensive to run an electric vehicle, higher upfront costs, lower maintenance costs, and they're cheaper than gas vehicles of the same size over their lifetimes. And there are significant CO2 savings, greenhouse gas savings for using electric vehicles in Vermont. They get an equivalent of about 100 miles per gallon from a climate change point of view for a smaller electric vehicle, which most of them are at this point. Under the key observations, if you scroll down just a little, that first bullet, the number of charging sessions has continued to trend up. Looks to me like it's may have leveled off at this point, but we'll be able to see that next year, just based on the trend line through the months that are in the tables further down. And then the third bullet, and this is the key point, because this charging station was put in with the ability to expand it. If it gets a lot of use, we could add 1 or 2 more parking spaces and charging heads. It has the capacity to put in another charger of the same type. An option would be to actually take that voltage, and you can get a level 2 charger that is more powerful, so charges up more quickly. So that's another option to think of in the future, would be adding a third parking space with a third level 2 charger, but one that could charge probably about 50% faster than the one down here. Because the conduit coming from the library could support that. But I want to point out that there were about 90 days when both chargers were in use at some point during the day. If they're both in use, then somebody coming to charge up finds out there's none available, right? So that's where you get to the point of deciding, is it worth having another charging station with the infrastructure that's mostly built out at this point, with that conduit coming from the library already. But there were only not, and today is one of those days, because as I came in, there are 2 vehicles there charging up. So today is one of those days where they're both busy and no room for a third person. There's no way to know how many people maybe arrived and were disappointed to see they were both busy. My guess is 90 days is about a quarter of the year, and it probably didn't happen very often. And people with electric vehicles, that's just part of the process for them. So and as it showed in a little higher up, there were about 72 days when neither of the chargers were used. So about 20% of the year. And so at this point, I have no recommendation to look at expanding. It doesn't seem to me we're at that point. Others might disagree, but I don't think it would be worth putting in a third charger at this point. But that's something to keep in mind and to think about next year, maybe once we have more data.
What would be the cost if we did elect to put in that third, more powerful charger?
Level 2 charger, like I bought one for my house. It was about $600, but I think I got a $300 rebate for that. Green Mountain Power may actually install it because it's on GMP here. I'm on Washington Electric Co-op. They may even have a program to put one in for free. But thinking through that, I think with that program, you have to program it so it won't charge during peak power periods, like from 5 to 9 p.m. on a weekday.
So would it not charge at all during those times, or would it charge at the lower rate?
It would, to get that deal from Green Mountain Power, I think you have to agree not to use it during that time. You can override it, but for a public charging station, it's going to have different rules than a private one, like the rebates I'm more familiar with. But just to get to the chase, it would probably be, with installation, I'm just going to guess, under a couple $1,000s.
Okay.
And you could always charge an electric rate that would recoup some of that because it wouldn't be using a town grant, but I'm just ballparking it.
If I recall, I thought it was closer to $20,000 putting both of those in at the beginning. So how would a third be a couple of $1,000s? Is that because we save on the excavation?
Yeah, because we save on the excavation and running the conduit. You're really just installing it. So maybe And we didn't have to like restripe parking lot and you wouldn't have to buy a charge point charger. The prices for chargers have come down. 2000s maybe lowballing it, but call it, $2,000 to $4,000, but the prices are coming down over time as the technology,
The reason I
economies
ask
of
is,
scale are getting built out.
the reason I ask is because one of the perceptions of non-electric vehicle owners is, oh, it takes so long to charge. And if we did have a level 2 charger and it did charge faster, who knows, that might convince 10 more people in Richmond to buy an electric car. It's just a thought.
Then we'd have to put in another charging station.
Well, ultimately, that is the way that we're kind of hoping, but
That's the broad plan, yeah.
yeah, Jeff?
Well, one of those two cars that's charging right now is mine.
That's all.
And the other one is the Tesla, which I was very pleased to see. Because it hasn't been charged in maybe 3 months. One of the things that will frustrate me tonight is that the way we have it set up is it discourages people from staying plugged in for too long. And the way it does that is after 4 hours, it charges $1 an hour in addition to the electricity rate.
The dwelling fee.
Yeah, dwelling fee, so my guess is I'm gonna hit that tonight.
You can afford it.
And I've hit it before, but where I think we actually should be thinking about it is the Tesla should have a special account. It should be the town account and should not be charged a dwelling fee. Because there are likely times when it'd be charged, it could be plugged in and charged overnight. One of the reasons to put that extra $1 an hour in is discourage people from coming in and parking in overnight. But actually, we want to encourage the town-owned vehicle to do that so that it's ready in the morning. We should look into that. And I think probably the charge point, what we have is the Cadillac of chargers. It is the best charging technology out there that I've been able to find. And it was expensive, not just for excavation. It's a pretty expensive piece of equipment because it's internet connected and it's on, you can find it, and it's got a lot of kind of bells and whistles. We only pay 10% for it, so it was definitely worth doing. If we were to put in additional charging stations like, I don't know, Tesla charging station, it could be separate, and it could be a different, it could be, a more of a, homeowner model than a commercial model. And it could be exclusively for our town-owned vehicle. So that's something that we can consider in the future.
Okay, Kara?
I do have 2 questions, but first I want to start with a comment. I think we're going to need more of these in the future. So my first question goes to that $1 an hour, Jeff, that you just said after 4 hours. Does that go to the town or somewhere else as that?
My guess, it probably goes to charge.
I can answer that. I actually did pull that data down. It's on the last page of the report. In terms of the number of dwelling hours, last year in 2021, there were about 119 dwelling hours. So that would be about $119. And this year there were about 89 dwelling hours. And that money just goes to the town as revenue. Because 10% of that goes to ChargePoint because they take 10% of all the revenue to manage the system.
Thank you for answering that question. So the second question, can I ask another one? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the other comment is I like to keep the dwelling thing there because if it's revenue that we're paying to ourselves, say if the police cruiser stays plugged in or something like that, Jeff, it's kind of a wash, so it's not really an issue. So I want to keep the 4-hour thing for the public so somebody doesn't park it there overnight when other people need that charging station. But I'd like to ask if we would consider increasing the rate to actually make a little money on this to put strictly into a reserve for future purchases of charging stations.
Well, I think I could address both of those. Well, first, just to mention that I think that with the ChargePoint that you can have an account for a specific vehicle. So that if the Tesla or another town electric vehicle were to plug in, some charging stations allow that. And if you'd like, I would be happy to answer that question for you, because I have access to the account, so I can check on the capability of the station. And then secondly, I think, Kara, is that Kara? Yeah, I think, Kara, that the grant actually restricts us from charging above the cost of electricity. And we do charge an amount that includes the charge point fee, but I don't think we can go higher than that for the 5-year period that the grant agreement includes. So for the first 5 years, I think we're out of luck on that, but that's certainly something to be considered. That seems a very reasonable proposal, thinking towards the future.
Okay.
And what year did we put it in? So when is our 5 years?
It went in at the end of 2020. Oh, is that right? Because 2021 was the first full year of operation.
Okay.
So it went in the end of November of 2020. The first year was 13 months, and the first annual report was 13 months, so that we could just hit the calendar year.
Okay. So I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank everybody for the discussion, and time is creeping on. Very helpful. Just to share my 2 cents, I would like to see more of these stations as soon as possible. For the reason I said earlier, I think the more convenient it is, the more conspicuous it is, the more people will buy them. And we do have, a Vermont goal of, what was the goal? To have 50% of our vehicles electric by 2032, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and given that it's, now that they're there, the relatively small cost to add additional stations, I think it's worth looking at a future date. Okay.
Very
What
good.
would Maybe bring that back as a cost estimate. What would it really cost, and when are we able and willing to pay for that?
And the cost would really differ depending on if you wanted to limit it to town vehicles and have it not be a public one.
Oh,
But if there was enough of a demand for that could be reasonable. That sort of a charging station would be much less expensive because it wouldn't have to be internet enabled. You could manage the accounts differently than as to having the public and having to think about how the public pays for their usage.
Yeah, I would suggest that we hold off on that until we, get further along with the town center renovation, because we're talking about completely re-landscaping the entire.
okay.
That makes sense.
But that said, okay. So thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we have a couple more items on the agenda before we get to minutes, warrants, and purchase orders. One of them is a quick update that some of our people on the call are probably looking forward to hearing about. It has to do with our traffic calming study in Cochran Road. As many of you know, we have various items that we are proposing to put in place, such as temporary speed humps or bumps, and other potential traffic calming measures. The temporary traffic calming study for Cochran Road cannot start until April or May due to the workload of the contractor. This means the study will not wrap up until about September. This is due to staffing shortages at Dubois and King, the firm conducting the study. Josh, is there anything else you'd like to add to that besides, April or May for a start date?
Yeah, so obviously when they first came to us with that, I was concerned that we were gonna be using their guidance to install temporary speed humps and potentially other temporary traffic calming studies for the summertime. And then that was also gonna inform sort of the more detailed scoping study that they were gonna do on each end of the road. So Kathleen Gent from the Transportation Committee and I got on to a call with Dubois King and CCRPC, explaining the situation, and they're going to try to move up and give us at least some recommendations on temporary speed humps, so that we'll have that by the spring. Although spring starts a couple hours ago, we'll have that sooner so that we can have some guidance to install the speed humps for at least this coming summer. Do they realize the urgency of the degree has been placed on that?
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, thanks for the update, and Susan, help is coming, I promise. Okay. Our last item before we go to warrants, purchase orders, and possibly an executive session is a review of the draft of the local emergency operations plan, which is in the packet. And I'm sure all of you read it in detail. Emergency operations is a particular interest of mine, but right now, not the time or place to go into that. It's about 9 pages long, and this is something that we're required to submit to the state, correct?
Yeah, we're required to update it every year. And so I went through and did a very brief read through and updating names and phone numbers and other things that kind of were obvious. The one part that I want to spend some more time on is the it's like where you have to categorize each piece of emergency equipment that you have. I was clicking onto their guidance page and it seemed like a lot of items were missing. So I reached out to CCRPC for more guidance on how do we exactly clarify what we have to. They looked at what we had last year. I don't know that everything there was as accurate as it could be. So I want to get more guidance on that and reach out to police and fire to make sure that we're categorizing the type of vehicle and the numbers that we have. But obviously, if there's anything that anybody else sees, I know last year we took a couple of meetings to look at this, so you can tell me now, or you can email me thoughts and questions as well.
Well, I have just this randoms. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
I just had one comment on page 5, at Camel's Hump, you have a capacity of 50. The building was built for 500 students. And there's about 350 now, so that capacity might be larger than that. And it says services warm, cool. There is no cooling in that building, other than the administrative office.
Yep. Okay, I thought I took that out,
But it wouldn't be for, people over, it wouldn't be a cooling shelter.
no, it wouldn't. And I thought I took it out, but
And one other question is, it says pets, no. So if we had, an Irene type flood where it flooded the entire town, there are people who might want to think about their pets if they're going to be out away from their pets for any days.
Yep. Okay, while we're spell checking on page 2, halfway down, computer IT services, you left off an E from simple route, which although simple route is still valid, it's just not how they're spelled. And I just had a random thought because this is something that another job I used to have, we had one of, it's a sandbag filling machine. They don't cost a lot, but when you need sandbags in a hurry, well, it depends on which one you buy. Oh yeah, sandbags in a hurry cost a lot, but a sandbag filler machine, you can get one that's under $100. It's just mechanical. And then you just have to have the sandbags, and then presumably we just go hit Pete's supply of road sand. But when you need sandbags in a hurry, you need sandbags in a hurry. It's just a thought. And given our propensity for possible flooding, it's just something that's stick in the back of your mind. Any other thoughts? Okay, well, it's my number that's sent there as emergency contact if for some reason Josh cannot be found, or Dennis. So I look forward to
No, you do not look forward to getting a call.
Okay, any other thoughts before we move on? Okay, then it is time to move into approval of minutes, warrants. Good, Bart.
A motion to approve the minutes of 3/13/23.
I'll second.
But we're not approving the emergency plan, is that correct?
There's nothing to, yeah. Okay, we have a motion from Art Hill, second from David Tanner to approve the minutes. I previously today did spot some minor, actually it was in the water and sewer minutes. I thought these minutes were fine. Anybody have any other comments about the minutes? Okay, seeing no comments, please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And J.I. Okay, as far as warrants and purchase orders go, I don't believe we have a purchase order this time, do we?
no.
Okay, so we just have the warrants and invoices. I hopefully everybody had a chance to go through them. Does anybody have any questions about the warrants and invoices?
This is David, move to approve.
Is Bart, I will second that.
We have a motion from David to approve the warrants and a second from Bart Hill. Please state your name and your vote.
Lisa, aye.
Jeff, I.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And J.I. Okay, next item of business would be items for next time's agenda. Does anybody have any items that they'd like to get on the agenda?
Well, we have the non-binding resolution on pedestrian and bicycle safety.
Okay,
Something that I would like to have on our agenda, but I don't know if it's next agenda, is Josh presented us with a calendar for, things that we have to do throughout the year. Something that isn't on our calendar are kind of strategic items. So that we don't necessarily, so we can think strategically and long-term rather than just respond to, the issue of the week. So I'd like to think about that at some time, and maybe have an agenda item where we think about what are our strategic issues.
Mhm.
We talked about things like, the fire and police strategic planning is something that's come up.
Mhm.
There have been several items that require some time and require some thoughtful conversation, I think. And if we just get, if we just address the items that come up over the last 2 weeks, we never get to it.
Okay. One other thing, the last meeting, there was interest in discussing at some great length the sidewalks in the downtown and the excavation of bodies, which we'd like to avoid. And I made an informal promise at that time that while we wouldn't do it tonight, we would do it next time. And that could well be one of those,
Strategic item.
well, one of those 45-minute to an hour-long sessions, which we'd have to, after the point where people start repeating themselves, we'd kind of, but that is an item that I know people want to discuss.
So maybe in addition to the topic itself, the content of the topic itself, it might be worth trying to figure out strategically when to place those items that we know will require a fair amount of time.
Oh, no, that when David and this is the thing I picked up from June is, and Christine Wernicke, I think, was the one who first started pushing this, is action items, front load, but things that are going to require people to be in here in person and wait. Well, front load those. There's a certain amount of juggling with the agenda so that we try to have it be the most pragmatic order, but we're always welcome. If you think something should be tops of the agenda, let us know.
Well, I mean, like specifically for like the sidewalks, for example, there isn't a decision to be made on the sidewalks anytime in the near future. And so like, and maybe the next meeting is the time and we will have time to have a 45-minute agenda item, and maybe not, so.
Well, let's see what else pops up. Is there anything else anybody wants to add to the agenda?
My only question is, does the sidewalk go with the transportation committee kind of reporting process?
Yeah, so something like that.
It's a
So
sub part of the
Yeah,
work they've
I
done.
believe we will want to report out from them.
So maybe just put them together whenever that is. Whenever. It would seem to me that, well, let's talk about the sidewalks when the transportation committee recommendations and report is ready for presentation and discussion, but maybe not.
Sorry, I know the transportation committee had some items related to the sidewalk discussions. Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about, like, so they went through sort of
I
like,
think that they had said they were ready via email for the call.
Mhm.
So I think they would be ready by the third.
So rather, so what I'm trying to avoid is 11 o'clock meetings, but having inviting the transportation committee to come in and talk about sidewalks instead of us having an agenda item, next week, and then 2 weeks later, we have the transportation committee.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a couple of items that seem to keep getting rolled up in the sidewalk issue going by the cemetery. Buried bodies, and so forth. Any questions like that being answered? Somebody's going to raise those questions over and over until we have an answer. So why don't we go look for an answer now?
Well, it is part of the scope, the scoping study for the engineering study that is not happening yet.
Okay.
So it's an engineering question, and we're not quite there yet. In fact, I think we've applied for a grant.
We did.
We've
got actually a couple sidewalk related grants.
Sidewalk related grant. We don't know whether we've received it or not.
Right.
If we don't receive it, we're not going to be going forward anytime in the foreseeable future.
Right. Okay.
So like, addressing those questions.
But let's try to get some answers there. Okay. We have had a request from a board member for an executive session to discuss a personnel issue. In your packet is an executive session memo with a couple of motions that you can make if you choose to. Jeff, would you like to?
Yes, I would. So I move that to find that premature public knowledge about a personnel issue would cause the town or person to suffer a substantial disadvantage. So my understanding is I moved that first.
it's Bart, I will second that.
Okay, so we have a motion from Jeff and a second from Bard to find that discussion of this would, in public would cause us to have a significant disadvantage, if I said that right. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, state your name and your vote.
Jason, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Our second motion,
So I move that we enter into executive session to discuss a personnel issue under the provisions of one VSA 313A3 and to invite town manager Josh Arneson into the executive session.
This is
David, I'll second.
we have a motion from Jeff Ford, second from David Sander. To move into executive session and invite town manager Josh Arneson. Please state your name and your vote.
Jason, aye.
Jeff, I. David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, so Aaron and Aaron, we are going to move into executive session. We're going to leave the room, and I don't know that you usually stay connected when we do one of these.
Yeah, they can, Duncan and Aaron can both leave. I'll get the motions, see if Duncan, and we'll stop recording when we're done.
Okay. So let's proceed into the conference room at the end of the hall.
Have a good night.
David Sander, second from Bart Hill. Please state your name and your vote.
David, I.
Bart. Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. Have a great evening, guys.
Thank you.
And lady.
Um,